strategic meeting for the 1st of July, the first day of winter, and we've turned the air conditioning on full blast to gain maximum effect. So welcome everyone. Can I get someone to open the meeting for us? Are you available, Councillor Ormsby?
I'm available, Chair.
Thank you. Can you please open our meeting?
Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki tēnei hui, ki ngā manuhiri I konei tēnā koutou katoa. Please follow along with our karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hia ki ana te ātakura, he tiro, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora.
Well, thank you for that, and I just want to welcome everyone here and to ask your indulgence if we could move the information to do with the HBRIC report, the quarterly update, which is agenda item 10, and seek your indulgence to have the chair of HBRIC address that matter. He's got an appointment elsewhere earlier, so if everyone's okay with that, the first item for consideration, that would be useful.
I'm very happy to indulge the chair of HBRIC, but I'm not sure about the chair of...
Thank you, Councillor. So, are there any notices?
Chair, if I could just advise, I've got a speaking engagement I've got this afternoon. I will need to leave at 3 p.m. if the meeting is still going. So.
Sure. Okay. So there are no notices, but in terms of apologies, we've got one from Councillor Foss.
Councillor Van Beek.
Councillor Van Beek, and an early departure for the Chief Executive. Any other similar departures earlier? No. So we can I have a move that we accept those apologies?
I'll move.
Thank you, Chair. So, no, your Councillor Williams, the second. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
That's carried. Are there any conflicts of interest for any item on the agenda today?
None from me.
None? No? No conflicts. Can we go to, and you'll appreciate the agenda had a large volume of documentation with it, not only various reports, but also which we'll consider today a recommendation to Council to adopt the annual plan. So it's a major step in our annual process. I hope you've had a chance to consider those, but if we can go to the minutes of the meeting of the 16th of March, I hope you've had a chance to look at those.
I move they be adopted.
We've got a mover, seconded.
Yes, second.
Councillor Ormsby. All those in favour of receiving the minutes will say aye. That's carried. I usually ask for matters arising, but we don't have that anymore apparently.
Well, no, we've never had it.
Can I go to item 4, which is the follow-up items in the agenda?
Thank you, Chair. So there are just 2 items in there, one of which is the carbon policy, which is scheduled for work in the coming financial year and will be considered by Council following the local government elections, and the other item is on the agenda today.
Thank you. Do we need a move for the...
Yep.
I do, yes.
I'll move that they be accepted.
Thank you. Seconded. Those in favour of receiving that report say aye. That's carried. Are there any minor items for the agenda, please? No? Gosh.
Chair, it's not a minor item, but if I could just let councillors and committee members know that the issues we're having with Wi-Fi today can be resolved by joining corporate RC2, and the password is winter 2022.
Well done.
Passwords broadcast to all of Hawke's Bay.
Yeah. It is. They will have to
An
be
open secret. I like transparency. I love your transparency.
Well, they'd have to stand outside the window or something to be part of our Wi-Fi network.
Thank
Don't
you.
watch us spike our uses.
Thank you for that, Chief Executive. Can we now move to invite Dan Drezianic as Chair of HBRIC to give us a quarterly update, please. Dan?
Thank you, Chair. So you've all got the report, I believe, and I'll talk to the major points and then we can head for questions. The headline is that really around the port, the port has had obviously with the world, COVID and the supply chain issues and the markets, world share markets in a little bit of chaos, the share price is down. So we have at the 1st of June last year end, the shares are on the books at $3.40. And the thing is, we've got 110 million of these shares, so it's a big number. So every 10 cents the share price moves, that's $11 million for us. So any given day the share price can move up or down 10 or 20 cents. So at the end of March, which this quarterly update refers to, the share price was $3. So there was a $44 million year-to-date decrease in the price of those shares. That's of course unrealised loss, and so my message there is, where the share price has fallen in a similar percentage to the Tauranga port. What we're hearing from the directors at the port is that the institutional investors they're talking to on their roadshow currently are comfortable with the company's performance. The share price is really an outcome of the current environment. So we're sort of so the point I'd make there is stay calm. It's going to move up and down, and we actually listed the company at $2.60. Today it's at $2.88. I looked at my phone this morning, so we expect that to recover in time with the markets. So that's the big number in the report. With the port's performance, the main impact for HBRIC and the council is dividend flow, because we have an expectation to deliver council dividends, and much of our ability to do that depends on the Napier Port delivering us dividends. And the good news is that since this report was written, the port have confirmed their June dividend at expectation, or it's actually above expectation. So we will be delivering our dividend to the council. HBRIC will be delivering on expectation the dividend to the council this year, which I believe is 10.1 million. So that's going to be happening in June. The port chair and CEO are on tour at the moment around in Australia at the moment, visiting institutions, giving a 6-monthly report on their 6-monthly accounts to their investors, and they have offered to come to visit HBRIC to give us a presentation, and we have agreed yesterday that we should do that together with the council. So rather than get them to do 2 presentations, so we're hoping we'll be able to schedule a visit from them at the next council meeting. So next year is, I suppose, a question that will be coming. So next year, I believe the dividend expectation from HBRIC to the council is 10.4 million. And that's right, Jess. She's not listening, but I think it's 10.4. It's slightly up. We've been getting, roughly 8 million from the port. So there is a sort of a $2 million make-up that HBRIC will need to make. And so with the managed funds also, This last year, we made the difference up on the managed funds performance. And as you will have read in the report, as a segue into the managed funds, that story is also being affected by the market. So this could be a little bit of a trickier year for those. So the performance of the funds to the 31st of March was down 1.78% for the 9 months, which is not too bad, I'd suggest. That's the end of March, though. End of April, the number was out to 4%, another couple of percent on the 2%. And as you'll know from reading the papers, and things are a little bit choppy out there. So those funds are being managed in line with the council's SIPO. So we have the same two fund managers, Jarden and Mercer, as the council's funds. And in the second 6 months of last year, we returned some funds to the council from our Jarden fund. So we had, and so our fund was, that fund was briefly out of balance with the SIPO, but that was realigned to the council SIPO in the December to January quarter. I'm not sure, Neil, whether this graph's available to everybody.
Yeah, committee, you would have had a late item addendum to that this quarterly report, and in it you will have seen the breakdown of the Jarden and Mercer portfolio. So it gives you a sense of the adjustment that's taken place. Have you had a chance to look at that amongst the pack? It was a late item on Stella. But if not, I think there's some hard copy around as well. And you can see from it that there's been quite a shift from the portfolio held before, which is dominated with global equities, and I suggest just in the nick of time that was diversified in respect of the SIPO, and as a result we've got a much more, if you like, conservative portfolio resulting. So that was probably timely, Dan?
Yes. So as you can see, we are going, there is some small decreases there in single figures. If you're an investor in NASDAQ and Google and those sort of shares, you'll be probably looking at 20 to 30% down. So again, I don't, I think it is what it is. Moving on to Food East. So unfortunately, Councillor Foster's not here today, but he has been, as chair of Food East, has been keeping us up to date on this project, and we are expecting some redesign, a presentation of redesign at our next board meeting at the end of July, mid-July. So that remains a work in progress, but we have the numbers on that remain positive. There's a bit of executing to do in terms of getting the construction designed and completed on budget. So are there any questions?
Just before we go to questions, I just want to acknowledge Peter Eden is on the big screen behind you, and so welcome, Peter. Good to see you, and sorry I didn't acknowledge you a little earlier, but you're in lights on screen here today. So are there any questions of Dan? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Dan. I'm just really interested as to why Mercer manages more funds for HVAC than Jarden, funds under management.
Well, I think the history, they were equal. So when this was set up, the design was to put equal amount of funds into both
Yeah.
providers and see how they went against each other. But there was a decision made last year to return an amount of money back to the council by way of loan. So the Jardine Fund was chosen to be the one to be cut back.
Okay.
So I'm just looking for the number.
About 12 million, I think.
And I'm just looking at that late paper. I know I read somewhere that I can't remember where, but they're always looking at allocation and in the funds, and this is just a balanced fund with a focus on global investment.
I believe so. Yeah. So sorry, Councillor Taylor, on the balance sheet on page 2 of the report, there is a loan showing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have HBRIC have advanced the council $16.6 million. So that's the number. That's how it decreased. So we charge the council a nominal interest rate on that 16 million, and effectively the council's just reinvested that money on their side under the same policy.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. I can't get in. Thank you, Chair. Yep.
Are you, can you see the papers?
No, I can't. It's frozen. I can't get in.
We're all a bit
That's all right.
frozen.
I'm
Are
just
we all
trying-
frozen?
No, I think
I've
it's
got
just-
mine up, but it's
just
Stella. Just
trying to close it all down.
continual bugbear.
Let's get endless error
Stop
messages.
behind
Stella.
So a few of us have, others haven't.
There it is. I've just found the HBRC line. Okay.
Second.
Are there any other questions,
Page
please?
2.
Councillor Foley and then Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Dan. Nothing specific, more just obviously the environment out there is way different to what we've heard from you and the board over the last few years. Has what's happened, changed your kind of ideas about what our investments might look like going forward? Is there any need to react and perhaps do anything different going forward based on what's happened in the short term?
No, I don't think so. I'm mindful that our 6% hurdle rate with interest rates going up, in time we'll have to keep an eye on that to whether it's still appropriate. It may turn out to be a little bit low in the end if interest rates keep going up. But we at the moment we've got in the last quarter we've managed to get Tom Skirman on board as our GM, as you know, and so Tom's busy quietly creating a pipeline of opportunities for us to look at, we look forward to just quietly progressing on those. The one we want to execute immediately, well, is this Food East one, because it's obviously got a bit of profile about it, and we want to make sure it works. So that's a bit of action on that to come from the Food East board this year.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Dan, and for the work you're doing on our behalf. I just a little bit muddled in my head about the port dividend picture in terms of timeframes.
Yes.
We received, by the look of it, on 31 December 5 million, or in December 2021, 5 million, with the budget assumption being that we would get 8 million. So was the 5 million an interim dividend?
Yes.
Over the 30 September financial year.
There's another 2.8, I believe, coming in June.
Right. I thought I heard you say that we were going to get 10 this year. No, so that's next year.
Well, no, we've topped that up during the year with distributions from our managed fund. So we've paid our total dividend up to the council will be another couple of
I
million on
see.
top of that.
On top of that.
Top of the
So
port.
at 8 from the port all up is about still tracking to.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And what, $1 million of the dividend it was agreed to be in lieu of a tax subvention payment. So yeah, by this means or that, we're getting the 10.1 million back up to the council as dividend.
In my understanding, second question, my understanding on Food East is that the way forward there is a scaled back project. I know Craig's not here, but is that the case? It is being scaled back?
Well, I think that they've had to the first iteration of design didn't come in within the budget, so they've had to have another look at it.
It's a construction cost issue, is it? Or
Yes. And so, yeah, Craig probably best to comment on that, but
But if I might help you with the answer, part of the problem, part of the issue is the building was to have some quite significant architectural features, and these were coming as a cost. And so the people have now been back and said, well, it's all very well to have, wanting to have a Mercedes S-Class, but we might only be able to afford a Toyota look. So we've got a slightly more a plainer look at a significantly less cost.
It's a Nissan Leaf, not a Tesla.
Yeah, so we've got a slight adjustment in there. So we've made some quite significant savings so that it won't be at the end an ugly building, which is my worry. Thought we can build an ugly building, it'd be just terrible.
It's got to be a useful building.
Useful building, good looking building, but not quite as smart as it was originally supposed to be.
Thank you. Chair, those are my questions.
Councillor Ormsby.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora, Dan. Thanks for your update. And I suppose I've been contemplating what's been said in terms of forecasting, which is quite important in our position. So possibly in a request, maybe that there be a quarterly forecasting or assumptions. You know, you can't guarantee that, but it would be good to have a section in here with the update on your predictions for the next quarter, possibly. Yeah, as much as you can add to that. I think that would be really helpful for us. Because I have asked around whether or not the war in Ukraine could have any effects on our investments.
yes.
And so would finding a place within these quarterly updates may be a place to have those points addressed.
Yes.
Forecasting forward.
I did apologise. I did seek out that answer to your question from the last meeting, and we have got no exposure to Russian stocks in the Mercer fund, I believe, and the Jardine fund we've got 0.005%, which they're trying to exit out of, but they've been valued to nil, and so it's a very, very small number they're trying to exit out of.
Yeah, so just a request or recommendation.
Yes.
Yeah,
No, I'll
thank
give
you.
that some thought. It is quite tricky because we have, that's one of the purposes of getting the port chair and CEO along, is because because they're NZX listed, they can't guarantee us dividends. So until they announce them on the day, we can only assume that they're going to meet budget. So, but I take your point.
Thank you. Any other questions out there? No? You're right, Peter? Yep. Look, thank you very much, Dan. Good to see you again. Just one comment in terms of the administration of HBRIC. We've got our trustee, Kishan, is now leaving us, so we're needing to replace him, but I'd like to acknowledge publicly his contribution, which has been exceptional over the last, 18 months or so.
Yes, no, that's right.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Got the report to
Move it. Can you move that, Councillor?
I'll move that the report be received.
Thank you. And Councillor Foley. All those in favour will say aye.
I'd like to say a couple of things, if I may.
Would you like to comment?
Briefly, just say that the point I want to make about these assets, these are, the port and the investments are intergenerational assets. There's things the port shares might go up and down, but there's no suggestion that we're going to sell down below our 55%. So although it does affect your balance sheet, it doesn't necessarily affect our cash flow. And with the investment funds, again, we've got a balance of investment funds. We just have to sit here and write it in and out, because sometimes they'll go up and sometimes they'll go down. And I just think the council needs to get it firmly in its head that these are intergenerational assets, and we can't approach them as if we are margin traders, looking to shift every time something goes. So it's just one of those things you have to have a very long-term view on, and they're doing okay at the moment, in my view.
Will?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, look, it's a bit of a shock when you see the change in the value of investments, and take the port, for example, but we just heard from Dan that still very solid business, going to produce, a healthy dividend once again. And so I think that's the importance here, just in addition to what Rick just said around our investments will go up and down. I think it's just important we remain invested in solid businesses that will continue to trade in times like these.
Any other comments from anyone?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Oh,
I was
sorry,
just thinking
Jackie.
about it. It is a long-term investment, which is great, but I think it's so important that we don't become at all complacent about them and settle with what we have, and we are always looking at what we're invested in, the funds are invested in, and what and the companies we're invested in, and always just reviewing that often. Thank you.
Thank you. No other comments. I'll put the motion to receive the report. All those in favour will say aye. All those against will say no. That's carried. Now we need to move to a very significant item, which is the annual plan for adoption. So this is, we'll be seeking to make a recommendation to council to adopt the plan. Who's going to speak to this? Have we got a number of speakers stepping forward, please?
So, Chair, look, I'll introduce the item. We have the executive team available to answer questions in relation to the substantive content of the annual plan. As a reminder for the committee and also for those watching, Council has decided this year not to consult on its annual plan, as it's entitled to under the Local Government Act, on the basis that the indication from Council is a desire to retain the current activity and spending track that was adopted last year in the 2021 to 2031 long-term plan. So this is year 2 of the long-term plan. I would make the observation that local government planning is not particularly agile, and we are operating in an environment that is more dynamic than is typical for local government. If we reflect on the item we've just had, a significant proportion of council's revenue does come from investment income, and therefore it is inherently at risk of some uncertainty and variability as market conditions bounce about. And certainly in the investment market landscape at the moment, there has been some perturbation, which is perhaps greater than normal. And then when you think about owning an asset such as a port, typically ports are very reliable assets that have very stable levels of activity and income, except when you have a pandemic globally that has a significant impact on supply chains. So in terms of the income side for council, there is some dynamism that we can't readily account for in our planning and forecasting. And then similarly in terms of expenditure, we're obviously in a high inflation environment globally. That is impacting on costs, particularly for third-party suppliers, but also putting pressure on materials for the organisation, rising interest rates, and in addition to that, we've got some wage pressure coming through the employment market. We also have a more dynamic employment market in New Zealand than I think anybody's seen for a very long time. Very low levels of unemployment, great opportunities for our skilled staff right across the economy. And with the borders having been closed for some time, there is a lack of supply around key skill areas. So in terms of the bulk of council's expenditure, it does occur in relation to staff time and costs. Typically, what we deliver through our people, and so that remains a reasonably uncertain and dynamic factor as well. So with all that in mind, if we were a private company, we would probably be pulling all sorts of levers to trim our sails and adjust our budgets in real time as we respond to our dynamic operating environment. Local Government Act doesn't allow you to do that. The Local Government Act tries to keep activity and expenditure on a very even keel over a long-term horizon. It's designed specifically to do so. You do that principally through your long-term plan and then make variations along the way. Council did give direction to staff 6 months ago, effectively, that it did not wish to consult. And the timelines we have working back from a consultation process and adoption and all the preparatory work that goes into that and going to the community does mean that council does need to make a decision nearly 6 months out from the time it adopts a long-term plan as to whether it's going to consult or not, which I just want to reflect doesn't provide you with a high degree of agility to change course in relation to a very dynamic operating environment. So the the annual plan you're presented with today does follow the plans of year 2 of the long-term plan, with some minor adjustments for some issues that have been discussed with council along the way. Staff judge those minor adjustments to be sufficiently insignificant as not warranting any consultation at this point in time. So it is our advice to you that you are in a position to recommend to council this annual plan and continue with the activity that we have planned for the year ahead. It does continue the ambitious program of work across the council to respond to climate change, freshwater, biodiversity challenges, as well as introducing some innovation in some areas such as public transport. And so we'll continue to create stretch objectives for staff in terms of delivery, because you have set an ambitious agenda for this council to respond to some of the most significant issues facing our region at this point in time. So with that, we have made some adjustments which are outlined in the paper, and we're have Gems available to answer any questions in relation to that. But I guess in conclusion, I'd just like to acknowledge that there has still been, notwithstanding no consultation, a significant body of work been undertaken by staff to prepare what is a very detailed document and a detailed set of forecasts, and it's never a small undertaking.
Thank you, James, and I'm just aware this is the opportunity. We've had our workshops, we've had a significant dialogue on the way through. It's year 2 of our long-term plan. We're confident we can progress this and meet our objectives, but it is the opportunity now at a committee stage to inquire further, to have some further input. And I think we've got a proposal to have an interim or a workshop prior to the 29th of June to consider any amendments to the plan or adjustments that in detail. So we've got that opportunity, but there again, today is a great opportunity to raise any issues you've got. If we can just consider it in terms of the financials, and we've got our Chief Financial Officer here to address that, but also you'll have seen tabled the look and feel of the document itself. Were there any suggestions about what that looks like? That would be worth raising now, so that we've got time to make any adjustments. Are there any questions that people want to raise at this stage?
I was just wanting to clarify, so the resolution is to recommend that the council adopt, so we have got that.
Yes,
time frame.
that's correct.
That was my question.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair, could I just perhaps make the additional observation that that local government finances are something of a rolling maul, which is to say you have a framework, which is your long-term plan and your annual plan, which is a template, if you like, that sits over a year, but the actual financials are also a combination of expenditure that rolls from year to year. And as you will note in the Q3 financial report that's also come to this meeting, that there are proposed carry forwards, and that there is activity which, while planned for a particular period of time, invariably has uncertainty associated with its delivery timetable, and that typically spans the financial year. So there's not a clean break at 30 June going into 1st of July for all council activity and council expenditure. And so at the end of each financial year, as is typically the case, there's an awful lot of movement around our reserves, our borrowing, etc., to, I guess, smooth through the activity as it actually happens. So the plan is one of primary intent, but it's not the last word in terms of precisely what will be delivered at precise expenditure on a precise timeframe.
Thank you. Chief Financial Officer, have you got a comment on the numbers? Are you confident you can deliver this plan in 22-23?
I think in terms of the numbers being a reflection pretty much of year 2 of the long-term plan.
We just probably need a microphone or step up to the.
I think in terms of the numbers being the year 2 of the long-term plan, is fairly reflective of where we are. There are obviously some issues, as James has just pointed out, as we go through the year in terms of what our managed funds and other things are doing at the moment and the impacts of COVID. But as James mentioned, a lot of the long-term plan was based with rates increases and deficits being offset by funding in various years. How we will deal with that over the next 2 years, especially for next year, is a change in the amount that is funded in each of the first couple of years by debt in the long-term plan. So in terms of actually getting the expenditure out and keeping a bottom line, I'm quite happy with the numbers that are presented there.
Great, thank you, Chris. Any other comments? Sorry, Martin.
Yeah, sorry, I did have a question that I've been trying to resist because you said stick to the financials, but 10.3 says acceleration of the right tree, right place pilot. And that word acceleration is troubling me. Where in the annual plan or where in our program of work have we demonstrated or evidenced an acceleration, and relative to what is my question.
So I'll defer to Mr Maxwell on this. This has previously been discussed with council about bringing forward some funding.
Yeah, correct. So the term, through you, Chair, the term acceleration reflects the fact that we brought forward funding into the 2 years, the first 2 years of the program. So that's simply what that means.
It might be more clearly stated in the annual plan itself, perhaps, because it references the Ahuriri Regional Park funding coming forward a year, but it might be useful to have an equivalent sentence for the right tree, right place. And I've kind of got another question that is one of those that you hesitate to ask because it reveals a lack of understanding of some fairly fundamental concepts. But I do feel those questions can be useful, and I'm rather prone to them. There's quite a lot of carry forward discussion going on in one of the other papers that we're discussing in terms of, I guess, the organisational report, the performance report. What I'm not clear on is the consequences. There seems to be sort of a hesitation around carry forwards and what they might mean for long-term planning or annual planning assumptions and that sort of thing. Whereas I would have thought that if you had planned to fund work and not done it, carry forward was kind of a no-brainer. If you still wanted to do the work, you just carry it forward. Am I missing part of the carry forward picture here in sharing those thoughts?
Well, I think the additional consideration is the doability of the work in future years. So in general terms, you're quite correct where we have intended to undertake work and for reasons which may or may not be within our control, not being able to deliver it within any given year, then carrying it to the next year or the year after is typically requested and approved and a sensible thing to do. It's done right across local government, and certainly right now I can advise the committee that just about every local authority in the country is experiencing underspends, significant underspends in their capital expenditure, and that is a consequence of just about every local authority in the country ramping up significant and ambitious programs of capital expenditure. With respect to regional councils, that's principally around interventions around freshwater management and flood management. With territorial authorities, it's typically around three waters. And so we know that New Zealand has infrastructure deficits and we're playing catch up, and central government has incentivised that in recent times with additional complementary funding. A significant proportion of our current underspend in capital is related to contracts with the Crown to deliver work in those areas. And so we're in good company, so to speak, but of course New Zealand is ambitious to catch up on things like fresh water and catch up on climate change resilience and infrastructure, all at the same time, with a workforce supply issue and global supply issues around highly skilled workforces, not to mention raw materials and the like. So in that respect, what we are presently doing, and we'll come back to council with some further advice on, is given all of those constraints, both locally and nationally, can we realistically undertake all of the activity we undertook to do? And if we form the view that even with the best will in the world we won't, then what we would seek to do is amend the financial forecasts either by a long-term plan variation in next year's annual plan, or to carry that into the next long-term plan discussion. But for now, we're certainly trying our best to catch up and deliver as much as we can.
All right, I think you've answered. I wasn't really testing the reasons for the need for the carry forwards as much as whether there were any implications on our decision to recommend that this annual plan be approved. We can approve the annual plan and then carry forward funding from this year without getting ourselves into any kind of trouble in terms of the way we've approved relative to what we spend.
Yep.
Is that right?
The majority of what is proposed for carry forward is capital expenditure that had been intended to be borrowed. So it's not actually revenue which has been raised and not spent. It's just borrowing that hasn't yet been undertaken. So that becomes a timing issue.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor
A
Lamb?
head scratcher, isn't it?
Sorry?
Bit of a head scratcher, all of that. I was looking at paragraph 12 of the next item.
Councillor Lambert?
In regards to the information on the annual plan that talks about Wairua and upcoming events, are we not starting the Wairua plan change this year or in the next 12 months?
So Wairua is a takiwā within the Kotahi Plan Change project, and so there's a dedicated work stream which is a plan change effectively for Wairua, but it will be through the single Kotahi vehicle of the Kotahi Plan Change.
Yeah, just that it's not mentioned in the annual plan itself. It mentions the Mohaka plan change, but not effectively actually moving into Wairua.
So look, I would draw attention really to the section in the annual plan around Kotahi, in which our work there is highlighted. It does reference the fact that we are engaging via dedicated takiwā, of which Wairua is listed at the top of the list there. So look, I appreciate that might not be clear in terms of the focus on Wairua, because it is part of a whole of regional effort. But to assure the community of Wairua, there will be a dedicated community engagement and planning exercise around the natural resource management interests of that takiwā.
Yep.
It's on page 17 of it, you'll see that there.
Yeah, the Kotahi plan, but there's another specific section on Wairua.
Yes.
The page
Any other
15.
Any other issues that people want to raise? Remembering this, we'll go into a workshop to have another thought about it, and then finally to.
No, you will not. They're not having another workshop, are they?
Leah, your microphone is on.
I'm so sorry.
I was feeling the same way you expressed my thoughts about that.
So perhaps just to provide the governance team with a little bit of comfort here, and to remind council that we are required to adopt the annual plan by the 30th of June, and our ability to make any significant changes to the annual plan at this point are not only I wouldn't even say they're limited. That cannot be done. But what we can do is answer questions that council have about the detail of the annual plan, and it had been suggested earlier today that a workshop be held to enable you to understand more of the detail of what lies within. Some very minor amendments to the document certainly could be made, and we would welcome anything identified by way of an error in today's document that we could remedy prior to the council meeting on the 30th of June.
Subject to Leanne's approval, of course. So are there any comments from anyone or questions to be raised? Otherwise, we can move to recommend.
I'll move that we recommend to council the adoption of the plan.
So that's recommendations one and two of the paper. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you to Councillor Taylor. Any comments from either of you? Any other comments? Councillor Foley.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, look, it's my third year sitting here with this process, and I've got to admit it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride. If you remember, back in 2020, and we were probably just allowed out of our houses and thought the world was going to come to an end, and so we moved for a 0% rate increase, and actually the opposite happened. The kind of everyone got back to normal and felt like the economy was going gangbusters. Moved forward another year, LTP, our region was still in a good space, and I think we sort of ambitious plan nonetheless, but we matched a plan to the circumstances. Fast forward another year where we are now, and as the C's pointed out, we've got what we've got, but yeah, I guess the lack of agility is certainly a struggle from my point of view. If I had to be a betting man, looking at the interest rates, fuel price, food inflation, I think we're in for a bit of a rough year ahead. I just spoke to a local importer, had some goods sitting in a container on a ship out in Auckland, waiting for his space in the port, gave up, turned around, dropped the container back at Singapore, and so now that importer's left with, still trying to get that container back. So how much of that sort of stuff's going to, continue to happen and get worse in the near future? So I think annual plan, as been stated, it's what we've got, but I'll certainly be keen to, watch the developments over the next year, and, if we have to adjust, in another 12 months' time out, I just point out that I think we need to be ready to.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. Any other comments? Well, I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That's carried.
Just before we go off this, just to come back to the point that you made, some sort of observation that we're looking at having a workshop before we go to the next council meeting, so that people can go through all the stacks of numbers on that and ask any questions they had to make sure they're all clear on it. We're all going to do that?
We will schedule that, Chair.
Schedule it, right.
All right, so we're up to agenda item 7, which is the shared services paper. I hope you've had a chance to have another look at that. We've had a run around the mill on it already, but...
inundated with submissions, as I recall.
And yes, the vast number of submissions received. Who's going to talk to this?
Chair, look, I'll speak to it. Sarah's here as well, who's been overseeing the consultation process, but I think we can probably take as read the paper. You have had a reasonable discussion on that last week during the council meeting, and we just present you with the recommendations to either agree to participate in the regional sector CCO or not.
Chair, if it'd be helpful here, we've been through this several occasions. I think it's pretty straightforward, and I'm really happy to move 1, 2 and 2.2.
2.2, so the options are there to agree or not to agree, so we're the recommendation to, or a mover to agree to participate in the regional sector shared services controlled organisation. Have we got a seconder for that, please? That's Councillor Ormsby. Do you want to speak to that, please?
No, thank you.
Yep. Any other, Councillor Ormsby? Any comment from anyone on that? I'll put the recommendation, all those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
And those against will say no, and that's carried. Thank you for that. We now go to agenda item 8.
Speeding right along.
Getting right along. Agenda item 8, and that's our performance report, 1st January, 31st of March, item 8.
Chair, we've got a decision item 17.
The operational land asset policy.
Operational land
Sorry,
asset
Chair, that was a
policy.
late item.
The
Oh,
late
sorry,
item.
yeah, yes,
Come
okay.
through on the right
Yeah,
sheet
so
there.
do you want to go to that? And,
If we could, as it is
Yeah,
a
just
decision
get all
item.
the
Okay.
decision items then.
So, sorry about that. So I'm
That's
hoping
marked
everyone's
down, you missed that.
been a
So we have
had a
Chris here
chance to
to
look
look
at
at that.
the late item. Has everyone seen the late item? No problems with not seeing it?
Chris, do you want to make any opening remarks?
Thank you, Chair. So this piece of work is really around providing a process and guidance for staff to assess any requests for land that may be surplus to our operational needs. So I want to be quite clear, we're not announcing a change of policy or a major review of our land holdings. When we looked at our various internal policies in response to requests, we determined that we didn't have a robust decision tree and business case to follow, and it was being done in an ad hoc manner. So we thought a good way to improve was to provide a decision tree and business case process where requests for land may end up with a decision for council. So that's really what's outlined in the paper. So it would be used when a third party expresses an interest in one of our operational land holdings, and we would make an assessment as to whether it is surplus and any mechanism to transfer an interest, and then the decision rests with council. This policy does not apply to any of our land held in our investment or financial portfolio, so it's simply around our operational land holdings. So the other part keen to get any guidance on is around who should bear the cost of any review, and this is particularly around a number of claims from Tangata Whenua that we're currently holding pending the availability of this process. They can be quite complex in nature to work through and then document in a business case process. So we currently don't hold any budget for this particular activity, and it becomes more problematic, particularly around flood control or drainage schemes that are small in nature and have a relatively low annual budget. And then the percentage of budget that might be reviewing our land holdings could indeed be significant in comparison to the operational budget for that scheme. So we have provided some suggestions there, and we suggest that we fund it up to a certain level, being $20,000, and then beyond that we share costs, but happy for any input around that process. So well, look, that's really it. The detailed drawing decision process, that's really for staff to follow. There's a whole lot of complexities with how we hold land, how the land was originally procured, and so we would work through that as part of a robust process that's pretty consistent across a number of councils who have the same process. So with that, I guess happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Sorry,
Chair, can I just raise one other matter that would be useful to get guidance from the committee? There is a recommendation in there that the matter be referred through to the Māori Committee and the Regional Planning Committee, and perhaps particularly get guidance here from Mr. Eden and Mr. Tapani, just on the basis that their representation here is obviously to help ensure that those committees have some visibility input into these kinds of matters in any event. And we're just ever so careful here to ensure that our partners with respect to the Māori Committee and the Regional Planning Committee do feel like they are being consulted adequately on matters they need to be consulted on, And this one falls into, I guess, the grey territory of being an operational policy in relation to highly operational matters. And it starts being the question of, of what goes to those committees and what doesn't. So some guidance from this table as to whether or not you think that is necessary, or whether the representation we've had both today and through the workshopping on this, which I believe Mr. Paku was at, is sufficient for this to progress to council. So just if we could have some guidance on that as well, that'd be helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, can I get you to comment, RP? And Peter, are you in a position to comment as well?
Yeah.
We'll start with RP and then come to you, Peter.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. In this instance, because it refers specifically to some legislation and settlement acts, and it's often the operational area where we as separate bodies get to interact most closely with the staff and the policies of this organisation. In my opinion, I think this is one of those aspects, and while I appreciate that delineation between governance and operation, this has specific reference to settlement acts. It refers to sites of significance. It refers to a number of other arrays which sort of weave into this piece of work, which will have an impact on ongoing collaborative relationships. So I think there are definite benefits in this particular paper going out to our PSGs and the Māori Standing Committee, only so that we can primarily have a look at, one, where we can work best in these spaces, but two, there may be some changes to this that will add benefits from a Māori point of view when working closely at an operational level. So from my perspective, that was a question I was going to ask, so thank you, Chief Executive, for bringing it to the fore. But I would very much like to see this put before the members of the RPC so that they can speak directly with their appointing bodies and potentially provide some further feedback to this council and to staff, noting, of course, that you've already had workshops and there's been significant discussion, but those haven't necessarily been followed through to the PSG level or to our Tai Whenua groups collectively.
Peter, have you got a comment?
Yeah, I just agree with what Uppy said. I think it crosses over into other areas with especially with PSGs and with the settlements. Obviously, Manahiri is just settled, so they're just going through a process, and there'll most probably be some or maybe some opportunity with the different investments that are coming up and that land issue around the floodplains, and I think the other two. So yeah, it's to go through and let the Māori Standing Committee and the APC work through that policy because it will have a direct effect.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on that particular issue in terms of referral, because it does affect the recommendations? Are there any views on that? I've got a few myself, but any other comment
on that or on the
I think just if we could just handle the referral process, whether we broaden this out to incorporate but the RPC and Māori Committee. Councillor Ormsby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the comments that we make today may have changes in this paper, then go to RPC and Māori Committee. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, at the minute, the recommendation is it goes to council, but if we're needing to have an interim step to go to either or both of those committees, then we'd need to defer that until after those considerations have been had.
Well, it could do. It doesn't necessarily mean to. I mean, it can go to council pending a advice from the Māori Committee and the RPC. It doesn't mean to say that.
It's just that we'd have to defer to a subsequent council meeting to give that time to transact.
The Māori Committee next week and an RPC the following week. We'll probably just missed the agenda day for the RPC in 2 weeks' time, unless they're willing to, in the spirit of being consulted, consider it.
Sure.
So it's doable.
So it's doable. We can progress it in that way. Are there any other views on that, or?
Just to add to that suggestion from Councillor Williams that this would need to be sent out within the next day or so to give time for that to be filtered into the PSG's own meeting cycles and then fed back to us as appointed members on the RPC. I know it's a bit clumsy and it has caused problems in the past, so I'm just saying The sooner we get that out, that we might be able to achieve something by the RPC for the 15th, but that puts a huge onus on the PSGs and the tai whenua to be able to get information back and in again, particularly around the expression of looking for ways to get stronger alignment around this operational policy at a catchment by catchment level.
Well, can I just put my thoughts on this? I'm not sure what July would mean that June doesn't, or the other way around. Not sure what price that month costs to the potential benefits of this policy to the people interested in it. But if we're not going to consult more broadly, bearing in mind that any significant decisions would have to go through the significance and engagement policy regardless, then it would seem to me to be appropriate to
give it that time.
But I don't know if there's some fatal flaw and it has to be the end of June for some reason I'm not aware of.
Well, it's one of those papers that was a solution looking for a problem, but are we wanting to broaden it out to that length of time?
Well, you can make things as complicated as you wish to. It just seems to me the paper has, at its essence, a simple proposition, which is that in the past, land was, primarily it's to do with land that was alienated by way of the Public Works Act, which the council now has in its control for its operational means. And people have made representations to the council, mainly as I expressed at the Hapu level, that the land that they were connected with for generations is now no longer has a connection with them, and they'd like to see this redressed. It's as simple as that. And what this policy is setting to do, so we'll put in place a framework to enable that to happen. So that is its simple essence, is to enable a conversation to go in a structured path. I don't see it as being complicated at all. So
I agree with you.
While we're making, if you make things, think things are complicated and you make them complicated, they will be complicated.
Yeah.
I just think this has got a simplicity as its essence.
Councillor Taylor.
Well, the complexity is the funding though. I mean, you've put that in the paper. Don't you really want to decide what we're actually going to do about that before you say that the policy is accepted? So we want to make a decision on that.
So, look, happy to take guidance. We've put a proposition forward.
Yeah.
Certainly in the scheme and scale of our operations, to progress a small number is totally doable. The challenge arises in those small schemes because for drainage and flood control, it is a user pays scenario, but we can certainly look at opportunities there. It's probably to get a guidance more around whether it's more a feeling of the submitter bearing the costs if there's an outcome to their benefit, or whether actually in the interests of strengthening our relationships with our partners and finding good compromises where everyone wins, should we actually be funding some of that as our business as usual? So there's a bit of a discussion around there. So look, the comments are right. This is on one hand a very operational decision tree that staff would use to analyse requests to bring them to council, and we can make it really complicated or we can make it really, really simple. What's in the paper is really quite a generic decision tree that many councils use for exactly this purpose. So we have a number of requests that have been sitting in abeyance until we work through this, and the longer it takes to work through this, the longer it takes to get to those cases. But we need to balance that with everyone having an ability to have a look. But it's not a policy decision to review our land holdings. It's actually a policy decision that's a lag. It's a lag position. If someone asks, then this is the process we go through. It's not here we are with a major review or undertaking.
Yes, and I fully support that, but if someone came to you with a business case, I think you need to be ready with an answer on how this is going to be funded. And, this is clearly user pay, or is council going to take some of that responsibility? Because otherwise, what's the point in progressing through a tree in a business case when you haven't actually agreed on the pricing yet, the funding?
Well, the issue is that we're not in a position to budget anything until we've got a business case in front of us. So it's an enabling piece of policy without any financial implications per se. My preference is to go with the recommendations as stated. We've got a window to do that with those two committees. It ought not to be elevated to a state that set expectations which are not achievable. And I just think we can safely go to those recommendations without too much problem. Any subsequent issues will be raised when we're faced with it. Cross that bridge when we come to it. Is there any other view, Councillor Ormsby?
Yeah, I just want to support the simplicity of this based on the number of requests. So if you can remind us the number and then the possible beyond that, because we don't need to make this Ben-Hur if actually practically on the ground we're only dealing with a small number. So can you remind us, Chris, what that looks like?
Absolutely, Councillor. So we currently have 4 requests from different tangata whenua organisations or representatives for 4 different cases that are all quite different in their complexity and nature. And our response to those people is that we want a consistent approach to deal with these requests. And so we're working on our framework for reviewing those requests. And when we've done that, we'll work through those particular 4. So therefore, of note, we have had other requests, particularly for people who lease land, etc., wanting an interest in it. And generally the answer to those requests is quite a quick no, because we need to retain that land as an operational nature, and it's not suitable for a more intensive application. So how many in the future? We can't comment on that. We don't know, but we do want to have a process in place so they can be assessed on their merits if indeed they do come.
Secondary. And how often will there be the ability to update the flowchart, or if things don't work out, in the agility around that?
Yeah, good question, Councillor. So look, like all of our internal policies for how we do work, they are on a review cycle. Typically on a new policy, we'd put it on an annual review, so we can consider, did it work as intended? Are there any changes to be made? And that's quite a normal part of our operation, to review policies on different frequencies, depending on how often they're used and whether they're new or not. Yeah.
Councillor Williams.
Oh, no, I think I've said everything. I mean, I don't want to make this more problematic, but the whole purpose of consultation, I think, with the Māori Committee and the RPC is that we don't know what we don't know. We might be missing something there, and I think it would be a safe step to put this through in those channels. That's what they're there for. I've got to say, I mean, I was a little bit underwhelmed by the lack of a right of first refusal policy in here. Where we get a request that's undisputed, that's obviously not relevant. But if we were to happen to review the ownership of an asset that we'd inherited as a result of a flagrant treaty breach, why on earth wouldn't we consider putting that to a party that was recognised by the Waitangi Tribunal as a victim of that breach? So maybe that's something that the RPC could think about. I can see here that this simply isn't engaged where it's coming from a request, but the policy also applies where we say, hey, we might not need this anymore. And I wouldn't have thought that was a difficult thing to add, but again, I might be missing something.
Happy.
Can I suggest then, based on the comments I've heard this morning, that and in the order of trying to achieve the 29th date, that initially forwarding this through to the RPC advisor will give us a briefing which could be easily circulated amongst both the Māori Standing Committee and the RPC, and that would need to be done within the next day or so, because they're meeting initially, TWR, on the 8th, before the 15th. So that might help facilitate a good conversation at our iwi representative space within the time frame and the constraints highlighted in the meeting today.
Sure, thank you. I think it's a good suggestion. I think we can easily do that. Councillor Lambert.
Just briefly, so I take it the settlements are still being done for Heretaunga and Tamatea? They're not listed at the back, the other iwi settlement groups?
just for administrative oversight. That was just information on that. But can I just make the point, respond to Martin's point about RFR? This is not excluding having a policy on a right of first refusal. That could come along later as a further development, an enhancement, add to it, quite right. But what the area this is aimed at is, I would estimate that of the land that this has affected, 95% of the land involved in this will be still required for operational requirements for the council. So we're not talking about large chunks. The other point I make about the time of this is to recount, I've been on a couple of visits with people whose ancestral connection with the land has been severed by the Public Works Act. And standing there, they pointed out to the fact that there was a lease licence on it, and cows and cattle were grazing on it, and the cattle had more rights on the land than they did. And what did I feel about that? Well, I have to tell you, I didn't have a coherent answer. Unusual for me, but I had no answer. And they said, well, what are you going to do about it? And we've delayed and delayed. Now, these are issues which have sat here for years, and I have no wish or desire to see them delayed any longer. I make the point to council again that some time ago, I was sitting out the coffee bar in Hastings and got berated roundly and solidly and with some justification by a couple of people who'd been on one of these visits. Well, we went there with you, Rick. Rex, what have you done? So these things are there, and they are, in my view, this is a policy which enables us to redress some things which are not right in a meaningful way, and we should simply get on and do it where we can, make good where we can. We can't accede to every request, some that we would have to say absolute flat no to. I understand that, but at least this enables us to have the conversation and make progress where we can, which is better than doing nothing.
All right, look, I think we've been round the mill on it, unless there's any other urgent comment. Have you got an urgent comment there, Councillor?
It's a question, legitimate questions to what's been asked of us in the paper. So you've given us an amount or options around how to fund a business case, and your upper end is the 20,000. So can you tell us what goes into an equation of coming up with 20,000, or where did that come from? And then I'll just have subsequent questions after that.
So look, that's a high level estimate based on experience. So we don't hold any expertise around land tenure in-house. So typically where we get one of these questions, we need to do a research piece on the land, the history of the land, and just some understanding of our options. So those sort of costs can rapidly escalate. They're expensive, busy resources, particularly at the moment. And then we'd need to put together a business case, and there's the pro forma there of the various headings. So again, internally for my staff, they will charge their time to a specific scheme or activity. And so there's a real cost associated with putting reports together. And so that's a high level estimate of a reasonably complex complex example. Many will be a lot simpler, and there may be some that are actually very complex. So we've taken a high level view of that's what we think one would cost to put together, just so there's an understanding of the effort involved.
So just subsequent. Bit of a curveball here, and you might not be able to answer it. Yep. So my apologies in advance. So if we consider the grazing of the cattle on that land, or these specific lands, and possible profit made from that, is that a part of the calculations into funding the business case?
No, so we haven't looked at that aspect. We simply looked at the direct cost of going through the process described in this document. We would, as part of that business case, articulate any potential loss or different financial model, so that would be brought up in that business case. And I think we've outlined here the total revenue from leases is about $90,000 per annum. So although it is significant on one hand in terms of the scale of our operation, it's reasonably low, and it basically helps to offset different management alternatives, such as mowing, etc., etc. So that's all part of the business case process to understand if the way the land used is changed, what the impact is on this organisation, if land was sold or transferred in another way, what the impact, and that's the purpose of the business case, to do that analysis and provide everyone with the information.
Sorry, I don't
Way you
think my
go.
question was clear. So I'm talking about the past how many years
Yep.
the councillor's been able to profit off the grazing.
Yep.
To then help inform
Okay.
actually what should our contribution be towards the business case.
Yeah, so I'd say there's no windfall profit for the margin. It offsets the rates for the schemes. So again, all the money collected through the targeted rate is spent on the scheme, and we can't spend it on anything else. If there's any left over, it goes into a reserve, which is potentially spent the next year, because every year is slightly different. We don't spend the exact amount every year. So the revenue collected through grazing has effectively reduced the rates of the targeted rate scheme. So there's no profit held. It's an offset.
Anything else, Councillor?
Not
Sure. Look, is there anything else that people want to raise? And is there a mover for the recommendation as it's stated, with that provision at 1.2, that we refer the policy to Māori Committee and the RPC for their consideration and endorsement prior to the 29th of June?
Yes, I'll move
Happy to
that.
move that, Councillor Taylor.
Seconded.
Seconded, Councillor Barker. Any comment from either?
Well, could I just say, is it council? What happens if they say we don't endorse it?
Well, that's the risk you take in this whole.
Just do we have it there so it's for the consideration?
Yes, perhaps that's a wiser
Because might
approach.
have some other things. But just think it should be for their consideration.
Are you happy to amend that, the mover and seconder,
Yes.
to remove and endorsement for their consideration?
I'm sure they will, but I still.
And it elevates it to something that's not meant to be in many respects, doesn't it?
There's I to make the observation, there's no commentary about this when we had our discussion on
Sure,
this Friday.
no,
This has
right.
all come out of the blue.
Yeah. All right, so you're comfortable with that?
Yes, comfortable with that, and just speak to that if that's okay, and just want to say congratulations for seeing the need for this policy. And I do support this and hope to see it in place so that we can better manage these requests.
Any other comments from Councillor Ormsby?
Yeah, thank you. Also congratulations to you and the team for also being very clear around the purpose and the opportunities it can create if tangata whenua are supportive of this and that relationship building opportunity it poses. So thank you.
Any other comments? Api.
One brief comment, Mr. Chair, just acknowledging those optimistic indicators from Councillor Ormsby. Those are key to the reasons why we'd like to see those go to the committee. And we welcome the opportunity to consider that, because until we consider it, we're never going to know whether it needs more or it's fantastic as it is. Thank you.
Peter, have you anything to offer?
Yeah, no, I think it's good taking it back to those committees because that's what their role is, and then it just gives confidence in the process. So I agree with what's said, and it'd be good to have those Māori Tangata Whenua groups endorse. And as Rick said, in the Public Works Act, obviously Māori and through the claims process lost a lot of land in regards to that act. So it's good that the council's taken that on board and looking at putting in a positive solution to work within the framework. Ngā mihi.
Yeah. Kia ora. Look, I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That's carried. So we can get those papers to the RPC people in time.
Sure.
On Matthew's recommendation there. Very good. Thank you. Righty, so we're up to agenda item 9, are we not? No, sorry, 8. Organisation performance report.
Thank you, Chair. So Sarah Bell's here to just showcase a couple of elements of new development to our quarterly reporting, which she'll do.
And Leah might need some help plugging it in.
Briefly, and just a reminder that you do on your devices have access to this through Power BI, which is the dashboard tool for you to continue to monitor organisational performance across all of our delivery areas. Just two things that I want to draw to your attention. The first of which is that I think if we were trying to name this quarter, we would name this quarter Omicron. So this was, remember, 1 January to 31 March, which was the period in which the nation really started first dealing with Omicron, and we went into the disruption around our operations that arose from the Omicron outbreak. So that has had an impact, but the other thing I want to draw your attention to is the high levels of staff turnover through the quarter, very high at over 7% for the quarter. It has subsequently come down more recently, but this was really the peak of the period of what has been described as the Great Resignation, where we had seen a good number of staff move on to new roles, particularly in this period with staff going to new opportunities in central government agencies for taking their much needed skills to the growth of new government departments such as the National Emergency Management Agency or the Ministry for the Environment. So with that, we'll throw over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, kia ora. Kia ora tata. I'll take the paper as read. Committee members will probably be quite familiar with this report, as we've presented 14 so far. There's just a couple of new features I just thought I'd draw your attention to this time. Each quarter after we produce it, we do go through it quite carefully just to make sure it's fit for purpose, and particularly around the data that's used as well. Sometimes it's drawn from lots of different quarters of the organisation, so we are careful to present the data as well as we can as well. The information that goes in here also goes to the auditors at the end of the year for our annual report as well, so very conscious of that as well. And we are looking to reunite the financial figures with the non-financial report as well. But as just a point of interest, one of the new features we have for the dashboard, which is gone through Power BI, is our strategic projects, which you get, the council, regional council get monthly through your significant activities report. So we now have a new tab here. So then also now on this report, so if you ever need to dip into it, we've got all of the projects that I think there's 18 of them that we review on a monthly basis. And we have their status by risk, schedule and budget. And you can see them by group. So we can see the majority here are asset management. We have 2 from our corporate services group as well. And then we have some from ICM, policy and regulation and transport. And you can see along the traffic light symbols up here, how many of them are on track and off track by schedule, risk and budget. And if you want a little bit more information, say let's pick the top one, Ahuriri Regional Park. If you click to see more details, you'll get the commentary that's in the second significant activity report, and also a bit of information about the project. We do want to build on this, so we might have a bit of a time series on how it's tracking, but that's just work in progress at the moment. But I think it's just a good resource for you, rather than having to go back through reports, if it's on the dashboard for you to access going forward. So that's probably one of the new features. You probably will notice in the report on page 10, we're starting to get some metrics on our new customer experience software. We're using Zendex to track customer inquiries through. So we're starting to get some figures. It's only been launched in February, so there's only 2 months worth of data that we can capture, but we will build on that, and we will look at building this into the Power BI dashboard. We haven't got enough data to do anything with it yet. And probably my last thing to point out is that just in response probably from the last 2 times that we've talked about the organisation report, we have gone back on our activity reporting and our level of service measure reporting to give a bit more rigour to it as well. So I think the comments were that this commentary said it wasn't on track, but the status reported green. And we did a lot of work to try and match that up and actually go back to the authors to say, you don't look like you're on track. Are you sure you want to be marking this green? And I got a lot of support from the general managers in that activity there. So although it might look a bit alarming that we have a lot more in amber than we did in our last quarter, I would say it was probably a lot more reflective this quarter about where we are. And we can imagine with COVID and having our workforce struggles and our contractors as well, that there are some things off track that we talk about, and it's in the report now. So I'm happy to take any questions if there's any further things to add.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Are there any questions of this report? It's a very comprehensive and illuminating report, so I'm sure there'll be plenty. Councillor Foley.
I'll just start with a couple of comments, actually. Just with regards to the staff turnover, one positive is the 23 new employees that were welcomed aboard. So that's certainly a highlight. With regards to the Omicron dominating the quarter, I think probably the Wairoa event is very much significant to those people up in that area. Just one question around down in the traffic lights on the FEMPS. It just, page 22, just spoke about a number of properties not engaged had been handed to the compliance team. I wondered whether there should have been any metrics around that to sort of gauge
okay, I can feed that back. Yeah.
Just to give an idea, is it?
Yeah, what number are engaging, some more detail. I just wanted to point out about the Wairoa event, the significant flooding actually happened in April, and this is the problem with quarterly reporting, you're always so far behind.
Okay,
so although we did have some rain events that will be more featured in the next quarter, and I know it seems so long away, but...
well, certainly, and long sort of term ongoing impacts to recover from that.
Thank you. Any other questions around the table at all? Great report, Sarah. Very pleased to see that, and we look forward to. Do you produce a full year's report at the next iteration?
There will be another quarterly report, but at the same time we'll be preparing the annual report, which a lot of the level of service metrics go into as well. So there will be some repetition, but then obviously we get the strategic plan outcome measures that we report on in the annual report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams, is that a moving or?
No, just a very brief question. I think it's just testing my memory from last week, but am I clear that we have now obtained the audit of the 2021 annual report?
Yes, we do.
Happy to move, Chair.
Is that a move? Moved by Councillor Williams, second by Councillor Ormsby.
Thank you.
Would you like to speak either of the two?
Just thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Any other comments around the table? I will put the recommendation to receive the report. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. So that's carried. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Lovely. We'll now move to agenda item 9, which I'll ask the question. Are you interested to have lunch at this point? Because that's on the schedule, but we just press on and get this report out of the way?
What about our morning tea that we just about didn't get?
What would you like
When
to
are you
do?
proposing to have lunch at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock?
Well, we're scheduled to go to
1:15,
1:15 for lunch.
Make a decision, Chair.
Decision? Okay,
Show some leadership.
we'll stick with this. We'll go to agenda item 9, which is financial report. Who have we got talking to that? That's Chris, thank you.
So Chris is available to answer questions. There's obviously a fair bit of detail in here. I will just give the overarching context once again. Yes, Omicron, so a period of some disruption. Having said that, the organisation has continued to progress through the year its activity, and the overwhelming majority of what we're trying to deliver is on track, which was reflected obviously in the reporting in the previous item. I think that's reflected in the financials. So you'll see with respect to our overheads, and what the overheads include not just our corporate backbone, which is all listed in there, but also our staff cost and activity areas. In that respect, we are at 99% of expenditure for budget. So of what we control and the work that we do day to day, we're very much on budget. The operating expenditure and particularly the capital expenditure, which relates to procuring third-party activity, largely contractors distributing funds out to the community landowners to get works done, etc. That's where we have our areas of underspend, and that's for a variety of reasons which are outlined in the paper. So you'll see that the operating overall is at 91%, and then the capital from memory, I think, is at 49, but I haven't actually got the paper open. I'm just going off memory here. But in the late 40s in terms of where we're at on capital. We do expect that we'll play catch up somewhat as we come into the end of the financial year. There has been significant effort by budget holders to surmount the challenges that came at us with the disruption of Omicron, and get work back on track. In many areas that's been successful, but it won't be absolutely to budget. So we do expect that once we get to year end, we will have caught up some of the areas of underspend in capital in particular. It is indicated in there that there are growing carry forward indications that will come to council for approval on. There is work being done right now to reassess the doability of all of that expenditure in the next financial year, and that which might get pushed out for conversations in the next long-term plan. So overall, I anticipate that the carry forward request, particularly in the areas of capital expenditure, will be somewhat less than indicated in the paper at this point in time, but we can't give you a definitive picture on that until all of the phasing and budgeting work has been completed. So we do have GMs here able to answer specific questions in relation to the activity areas, and Chris can certainly answer any questions, I guess, from the overall finance team perspective.
Chris, any comments at this point?
No, I think James has pulled all of that together very well in terms of the summary. I do know there's a lot of detail in this report, but obviously there's a lot of stuff happening, and there's a lot of things that actually contribute to the financial position in there. The only other thing I'd say is in quarter three, we have seen an increase in expenditure compared to the first two quarters, which is what we had been predicting, that the first half of the year was going to be very light in terms of the LTP, and it is starting to build up, and we'll go from, hopefully in the next couple of years will be a lot higher as we predicted.
Chair, I probably should have also just have brought the committee's attention to the fact that in terms of our net position and where we're tracking, where we expect to be, given that income is a bit ahead at this stage and expenditure is under, is that the forecast deficit for year end that was going to be debt funded will be in all likelihood smaller than anticipated, and so we'll be closer to a balanced budget, if you like, than we thought we were going to be. So from a sort of fiscal prudence point of view, we're tracking very well, very comfortably. So no concerns there.
Thank you.
For the balanced budget, why do we need a rate increase?
Well, the rate increase funds the achievement of that.
It does raise the spectre, though, of the ambitious program we've got in play and our delivery thereof. And I appreciate what what people are saying about the expected increase in expenditure over the last quarter. But nevertheless, the forecast is telling us that, for example, the CapEx is going to be 18 million overspend. I'm interested to know from particularly those managers responsible what steps they are taking to overcome the identified problems to ensure that we're on track for our various programs. And I note the areas of concern or the areas of underspend around our assets, etc. And Chris, are you able to help us with your very lofty plans to spend lots of money?
Thank you, Chair. So, look, happy to provide some comments. So, really, they align with paragraph 33 as we go through some of the key areas. So, obviously, the resilience work, particularly around Heratoga, Upper Tukituki, and Wairua, delivered through the infrastructure reference group, is below budget, and there's a few reasons for that. One is weather. And interruption on our active work site at Taradar, which has been shut down a couple of times already, and we were unable to achieve a second work front, and that's due to resources, and then finally the rain event, which was the last nail in the coffin for starting that second site at Mauteo. So it is the availability of external resources. It's very busy, and what we're also seeing is the experience level of those is generally lower than in normal conditions. So we have extra work almost to do with some of those external providers. So our response there is to procure some additional staff because we have 3 to 4 work fronts scheduled for next year to ensure that we're well placed to run that. Also on the Upper Tukituki, that's in terms of the extraction there, we've had delays there due to the, in fact, fantastic that we got the movement of gravel through the scheme, but that means some rework with surveys and that the river was unavailable for machinery for a period there. So we are bringing on additional resources, and we've also had a vacancy heading up our project delivery group for 6 months. So we had to sort of backfill that as best we could, but we have a new person starting mid next week to take us forward there. The other area, of course, is Clive River Dredging, where we've been effectively unable to achieve a consent for that shore discharge of the dredge. So that work, we're looking at land-based opportunities, but that effectively defers that work. And then there's a significant amount in the water security, and that is, I guess, the social licence there to deliver those projects and the work that needs to be done to prepare us for those projects. So that outlines it at a high level. Also looking at additional resource to improve our pipeline of projects from the asset management plans into the hands of project managers. And we have an additional project manager in the LTP for next financial year once we de-bottleneck that pipeline.
Thanks, Chris. Nothing from you, Ian?
So, Chair, probably the most relevant paragraph, if I can just find it again, is 48, where we talk about our underspend, particularly in the ECS program. So what we will be doing towards year end is bringing a clearer picture of what we think is feasible and planned and able to be delivered next year, and to effectively relinquish or not propose to carry forward the underspend that's loan funded for that work into the new financial year, because all we're doing is chasing our tail with a sum of money that we haven't had the capacity to spend. So we're going to bring you back a picture that says, well, here's what we've got committed in the pipeline, here's what we know we can achieve in the financial year we've got ahead of us. This is the required budget, this is how much we would like to leave in the bank per se. But what I would like to do, is signalled in the paper, is in the development of our long-term plan, is to reflect on whether that's a program of work we simply look to spread out over a slightly longer period of time. And look, all of the other aspects of our underspend relate to things like availability of contractors, whether it's well drilling, whether it's getting GNS, science support for our modelling work, whether it relates to Aarhus University in Denmark, that have all been COVID affected but are still planned and achievable. It's really just in the sequencing and timing of the work that we're struggling with.
Thanks, Ian. Any comments, Councillor Ormsby?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I'm looking at para 17, just with the operating income and expenditure. So I see some significant numbers there in percentage, particularly for policy and regulation, with the net percentage being negative 304, and then governance and partnership negative 272%. So I'm sure this can be reasoned, but I'd like to understand the extremity of those numbers. That would be great. Thank you. Through you, Chair.
Chris,
I could probably just answer briefly on the large percentage numbers. That's on a net position of income and expenditure. So when you have a net position and it's got a very low surplus or deficit, any change could end up in a large percentage. So, for example, the 304% for policy and regulation, their income's on track at 100% right on track of budget, but their expenditure is down by 81%, and the addition of those two causes the 304%. It's probably not a really helpful percentage to actually have in there. You're more better to look at the percentages against the expenditure. And
so there's no real concerns there, Katrina, with the percentage?
The bulk of the lack or the expenditure that hasn't been spent is relating to kotahi and our delays around that. There's no doubt in my mind that we'll catch that up easily going forward next year and probably surpass
Thank you. And is that the same, sorry, Chair, for governance and partnership?
Governance partnerships, at 95% is largely on track. Most of those costs are fixed. There's been a little bit of under expenditure because we didn't consult on our annual plan, and there's a bit of under expenditure in terms of the tangata whenua Māori partnerships element of that budget area, which relates again to kotahi and support for kotahi.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just lost my train of thought. Mostly, there's good reason. It's clearly evident the reasons why there's underspent. But my question is, do you think you were too ambitious and didn't consider the risks enough, as in tangata whenua, losing staff, that sort of thing?
I think in terms of, so with respect to tangata whenua, we've had a long-standing issue of under expenditure in our policy development space, and it goes back to tank plan change and then flows into kotahi. It goes to some of the other plan changes we've tried to do. It's very lumpy and it's very hard to forecast planning activity, and it can be very expensive at periods of time. So the tank plan change, for example, has cost in the millions of dollars, and the extent to which it will be appealed and the cost of appeals is very hard to judge. We ended up with a water conservation order that we didn't ask for being imposed on us, and then we ended up also with appeals to our outstanding water bodies. So the whole planning budgeting varies highly year to year, and I would say that we're not making nearly as much progress in that area as we would like because of what I would say is understandable hesitation from our tangata whenua partners about big decisions, and trust and confidence in this institution to be a partner progressing at pace in those areas, and that's similarly the case for our water security work program. We have a strong sense of what we think are solutions to the region's water security problem or challenges, and we have resources to spend it, but we have a trust and confidence issue with our mana whenua that some of those interventions, whether it be managed aquifer recharge or above ground water storage, will deliver acceptable outcomes, or whether they will exacerbate current pressures, etc. So I think, look, we remain optimistic that we will make progress in those areas, but have I been surprised in my tenure about how hard those issues have been to progress? Yes. I would have thought after 5 years of trying to push things like water security, we would have made more progress. Trying to improve our regional rules around fresh water, I would have thought we would have made more progress. But it's a journey of trust and partnership, and that's one where you can only go as fast as your partner if you are to remain in a partnership. So I think as we look into our next long-term plan, we need to have these conversations with our mana whenua about pace and about what's realistic and about trust and confidence in the council's overall work program. We have been surprised by the Great Resignation. The levels of turnover that we're experiencing are in line with our local government right across the board and the wider economy, and we're actually better off than many of our colleagues in other parts of local government, despite how high our numbers are. I don't know that anybody really predicted that. I think most of the predictions going into COVID were that people would value job security. People didn't understand the psychological effect of COVID on people wishing to, explore new opportunities in their lives. And also the fact that the fiscal stimulus would be greater than probably what was needed, and that would essentially overheat the economy. And we're now obviously at 3.2% unemployment and the highest level of vacancies right across the economy, particularly in highly technical areas. So I think we could have forecast higher levels of turnover in hindsight, and expected that we'd have more headwinds in delivery of areas reliant on key skill areas. Again, I go back to my comments earlier about the lack of agility in local government planning. It's almost a kind of set and forget type system that sets you up to make reasonably long-term assumptions, and it's not particularly conducive with such a dynamic environment that we're currently operating in. So it's hard to manage with our local government budgeting processes and planning processes with all of that dynamism.
So secondary to that,
Yeah,
thank you,
Councillor
Chair. Thank you, and that's a really good explanation, but so going forward, I like ambition. Ambition is good, but going forward, I'm sure that those risks will be acknowledged a little bit more. I hope they will be, because we may continue to have a high staff turnover and may lose a lot to overseas, whatever. So, I mean, I do like seeing us progress in many ways, but I think it's just all group managers need to realise that there's still potential risks of losing staff. It's an ongoing risk.
Look, agreed, Chair, and if I could just make one final comment that not everything we seek to do that is ambitious is been of our own making. Councillor Foley attended a meeting of the regional sector recently where some of the biggest drivers of our work are freshwater reform and a timetable imposed on us by central government, and the conversation being had nationally by regional councils with central government is whether the timeframe we've been set is realistic, given there are only so many freshwater ecologists, only so many planners, only so many hydrologists, only so many people, and only so much capacity in our rural communities, and only so much capacity with our mana whenua to do a complete overhaul of every rule and every policy relating to land and water use in the country within the next 2 years.
I'd like to move the report be received.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Williams. You've got a mover for the report.
And I just want to make a brief comment.
And we've got a seconder, Councillor Ormsby. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, look, I think everyone's got the same concern that there's a perception we're not getting on with what we've promised to do. But, and I think as governors, we need to be very alive to ensuring we learn from this experience. It particularly concerns me that the very areas that are the most urgent, like water security, erosion and sediment control, and right tree, right place, and flood protection are the ones taking the biggest hits in terms of capital spend. But let's just give ourselves a bit of a break here. Who would have picked, when we were building up this long-term plan over 19, 20, 21, that, we'd be facing, in our significant risks and forecasting assumptions, a combination of the most active government reform for local government, a global pandemic, Putin invading Russia, an overheated economy where you can't actually do the work you've got money to do. I've never in my life, and I'm only 55 years old, been in a situation where we are overemployed and you cannot get. We've had supply logistics, you name it. It has been the most disrupted scenario anyone could hope to plan for. But I totally pick up Councillor Taylor's point. We do need to learn from this. Thank you.
Councillor Ormsby. You've had enough? Yep. Councillor Barker.
Well, I'd just like to say, I appreciate the comment about us being ambitious and about doing more in the predictions, but I do want to sort of weigh in on the other side of it from Councillor Williams, in that predictions are always problematic, and plans are always just a measure of how wrong you are. This is the way it is. I've never, like him, like Councillor, I've never struck a time where there has been so many stock not available, the stuff you just can't get. This is without precedent. Simple things, staff vacancies without precedent. You go down to Mahu Road, Malakako Road, signs out for jobs, never seen it in 20, 30 years. Supply line disruptions, it's all there. And when it comes to making predictions about what you're going to need in resources to consult on fresh water and so on, any prediction you make is heroic because inevitably it's going to be wrong. It's just one of those things. I feel every sympathy for James and the team about how right they're going to be because it's just a planning nightmare. What I think we've got to do is not measure from how we missed, but by how much we achieved. I think we should pick up from the bottom there. And looking back over the council's achievements over the last 12 months, I think we can say we've had a pretty credible record, really. I'd give ourselves about a B+, A- pass. Haven't been spectacularly successful on everything, but we've done a pretty solid job, really. And yes, we haven't done as much as we'd like to have done on our stop banks, but on a couple of occasions that's because of floods and events outside our control. Other things, it's been machinery and labour and so on. But what we've done our best. Haven't quite got there. So I think the ship's ticking along pretty well. And I just want to put on the record, I think it's doing a pretty fine job, considering could have been a lot worse. So I'm pretty happy with progress.
Thank you for that, Councillor.
But I'd like to make a note that you're late to have lunch too, by the way, Chair.
Yes, well, I've allowed speakers to continue on speaking, and I should have been much more diligent on that.
You could have rung the bell.
Only
Well, I
3
have
minutes
now.
over.
Just ringing the bell. We've had all the speakers we're going to have, unless Councillor Foley would like a special dispensation.
No, look, I just agree with Councillor Barker. What we do achieve still in this environment is very much a win, but just to acknowledge the staff that, having to work in this every day, trying to balance their budgets, find supplies, find staff, and just get on with it. It's must be just as frustrating for them, as anyone. So just a thank you to them.
Yeah, just echoing that, I think it's important. It's been a really tough go, and the staff need acknowledgement for sticking with the ship. Those that have stuck with the ship, and but we've learned the lessons and we're moving on, and I think we shouldn't shy away from being optimistic, having that vision in mind that we've got to do something fast and keeping that momentum going. So. I don't think we should shy away from pushing hard, but to acknowledge the good work that's been done. So thank you for that, team. And we'll break now for lunch. No, we won't. We'll pass the resolution recommendation. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That's carried. We'll now adjourn for lunch, and you have 5 minutes for lunch. So
5 minutes. 10 minutes late. 12 minutes late.
20 minutes.
Does it go on here?
All good to go? Can we now move to, we're up to finance, audit and risk, are we? Here we are indeed.
Yep.
Gosh, I'll take it as read.
Chair, could I just, with your indulgence, draw the committee's attention to a couple of matters?
Where you go?
So just with respect to the annual internal audit plan, as noted in the paper, there is an intention outside of the internal audit program undertaken by Crow to do a deep dive review of our health and safety functions. So as a reminder to the committee, council had no dedicated health and safety internal capability until 2020, at which point a conscious decision was made to invest in capability in this area, and we now have a team of 3 of health and safety and wellbeing staff, and that has been in support of both the growth of the organisation and the increase of operational activity that we do in high-risk environments, particularly in our rural communities and more out in the field. And now that we have that resource in place, and it is the subject of a separate item of today's agenda, it is timely to consider whether or not we do have all of the ingredients to meet best practice in terms of health and safety, and that the work program of the team is covering all the bases. So that's timely and something we look forward to, and will be procured with an external independent expert to provide assurance both to myself and the leadership team, but also to you as councillors of our health and safety practices, and just to ensure that we're meeting our obligations in that regard and keeping our staff healthy and safe. Also, just draw your attention to the intention to have a deep dive into our asset management systems. So we obviously have an ambitious program of capital expenditure to improve the performance of our assets, but the management of those assets in terms of the full life cycle of them, and the system under which the condition of all of our assets, the existence of all of our assets is monitored, tracked and planned for, is a work-on area for the organisation, and we do think it would be useful to have an audit of that. There is just a question of the timing of that audit, and so the committee has agreed that the Group Manager Asset Management will present to its next meeting on what is being done in that area, so that some decisions can be made about timing of that audit. And just a final thing from me is the fraud internal audit report that the committee considered. If I could just draw your attention to the fact that we have work to do in this area. We have no high priority findings, which is to say we have no burning platform in terms of our fraud risk that requires immediate remediation. And generally, we have good practices and procedures with respect to our double approvals and the way we do our data analytics every year, and the policies we have internally generally. But we have some opportunity to improve the existing policies in terms of their coverage and in terms of their visibility and training with staff in particular. So there are some actions there that the committee has agreed to and recommended by way of corrective actions, and you'll see that there are dates all associated with those, and the resourcing to ensure that those are undertaken has been put in place, and we'll get on. And I look forward to reporting back to you that we have essentially covered all our bases and get to a high degree of maturity in terms of our fraud risk management within the remainder of this calendar year. So that's all from me, Chair.
Thank you, James. There's a tremendous amount of detail in those various reports, and they can be accessed in Stellar if you're really desperate to read detailed reports. If I can get a comment from Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Foley, we'll move rapidly through this paper.
Yeah, I think thank you, Chair. I just want to comment on that asset management review, just for all other councillors to understand as well, is that we, and as a committee, wanted to be able to see what our assets are and how they're managed, and just something that we can oversee as much as the organisation does. So I'm looking forward to that presentation from Chris.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Foley.
Well, thanks, Chair. Nothing really to add there. Just hopefully the wider committees see the kind of deep dive and thoroughness of what the FARS committee is going through there, and as you say, the reports are there for any of the corporate and strategic committee to look into if they want to go into it any further.
Thank you, Councillor. And I mean, from my observations of being a member of the FARS committee, is that there's a tremendous amount of activity goes on, examining almost every nook and cranny of the organisation, and I've got very high levels of confidence that from financial management, managing our risks, that we've got a really competent team in play. We've got a high level of assurance going on, and I think the FARS committee does that, if you like, on behalf of the organisation, of the governance team, and I think that we almost have a reliance on that group to consider that part of the business. But are there any other comments around Councillor Barker?
I see we're doing a lot of diving in this report. So I just hope that before you dive in, you've checked the surface underneath to see you not have an accident. So one of the dives I want to have a look at is health and safety. And it says here, I thought it started from a very negative point of view, practices are compliant with legislation. Is there any suggestion at all that we are not compliant? That's what the implication is. That's that when you read that, that's what it implies.
What I would say about the legislation is it's as we've, I guess, seen in recent cases taken by WorkSafe, some of which have been thrown out by the courts, including in respect of the roles of public authorities, and you can think about civil defence in relation to the Whakaari incident. I think there's room for interpretation around things like all practical steps, etc. What we want to do here is have an independent expert look at our practices and assure us that we are meeting those statutory obligations. We certainly come to work every day in the belief that we are, and we certainly strive to meet those. But ultimately, they may at some point be tested, and we'd like to have, I guess, certainty that in the event they are tested, that we have left no stone unturned in terms of meeting those obligations. But more importantly, as I think implied by Councillor Barker, is that we're doing our best by our staff.
With respect, you've mentioned two things there, legislation and courts. They are two different things. What the legislation says is one thing, what the courts interpret to mean is something different. So are we looking to keep up with what we understand the legislation says in its plain meaning, or the court's interpretation? And I want to go back to it. Is there any suggestion that we are non-compliant? I haven't got an answer to that.
The answer to that is no.
Thank you. Now, second I want to get to is that we did carry out a thorough review of health and safety some time ago when I was on FARS. Is this new a review part of an ongoing program consistent with a regular timetable, or has it just come up out of the blue with no connection to the previous work undertaken in this area?
So look, it is connected to the previous work, and we are cognizant that work has been undertaken in times past. The genesis of this being reported through this mechanism, really, given that there was an intention by our health and safety team to commission an independent review regardless of FARS, is the annual internal audit work program of CROW. And as part of finding work to do for both CROW and the FARS committee, looking at areas of risk of council, this one was identified as one that's time had probably come again. And that's particularly in relation to the amount of investment that council's made and the changes that we've undertaken since the last review to address a number of the recommendations previously. It's a check-in at the stage that we have shifted the dial really in terms of where we're at
at that previous point in time, and that we've now got our resources and our team deployed appropriately in terms of their activities and focus across the organisation.
So I would have thought of going from 0 people dedicated to focus directly on health and safety to 3. I would have hoped it would have shifted the dial dramatically.
So we believe that to be the case, but we would like an independent expert to assure you that that is indeed the case.
Coming back to your thing, looking at work for Crow, is this a matter of making work, or we have this is new work?
Well, we have a contract with Crow that provides a certain number of hours every year for internal audit work, and that's available to the FARS committee to initiate particular areas of inquiry that it wishes to look into. And so each year there are choices as to how those resources are deployed. Okay, I want to come to the next dive that you took, and that's on the asset management systems. What is it you're trying to achieve here? It's not clear quite here. I'm not. Is there a perception of failure, or is it just checking to make sure that the pulse we feel in the head is still the pulse we feel in our arm? Look, I think in terms of the standard sets of issues that Crow look at, and they do provide the committee with a sort of a generic template of the areas they look at across organisations. Asset management systems is one of those. It's obviously for any organisation that holds significant numbers of assets that are publicly funded, you want to be assured that you've got a system that tracks the condition of each of those assets, where they are, what they are, the performance standards that they work to and deliver to, their age, the condition, the maintenance of them, all those sorts of things, to ensure that investment in our physical assets is money well spent, and that those assets are continuing to be maintained and updated and kept in a serviceable condition, or are being replaced in a timely manner. So all of that needs to be systematised. Historically, the Regional Council did not have a single, or it still has not got a single integrated system for that, and certainly not one that backs into our financial management system. The development of our financial management information system with Tech One through the Fuse project has created a platform for us to add on a module for asset management, and that's something that the software provider does provide to other local authorities and is part of the service offering that they have with us under the current contract. So we have the opportunity to take what currently exists on a range of Excel spreadsheets and paper-based records to bring that into a fully modern era, and to back that with our financial system, so that as we are building budgets around things like depreciation, capital expenditure, that is all connected to and feeding into an ongoing track record of where that expenditure is being made, what are the impact on the quality of our assets, etc., and that becomes a continuous loop of information that enhances our ability to manage our assets in a more timely and effective manner than we do at present.
So the internal fraud report, do we have an issue with internal fraud?
No, we don't. So we've had a very good track record in terms of our annual data analytics not finding cause for concern. And I, along with the chair of the council, each year make an attestation around our awareness of fraud, etc. Fortunately, in my time, I have not had to deal with any fraudulent activity within the organisation, and I am not aware of any that have been undertaken. And we believe that our systems and processes are generally fit for purpose. What the review did find is that with a significant number of new staff joining us, growth in the organisation, staff turnover, the awareness of all of our policies isn't as high as it could be. So there's work to do in terms of our induction and training of new staff, as well as refamiliarising existing staff with policies and processes. We also don't presently have a formal escalation mechanism, particularly a whistleblower function, that we can put in place for staff, and we're currently looking at an independent provider to provide that, so that if staff have concerns, particularly the concerns that might relate to the actions of management, that they might feel uncomfortable with raising, they have got a safe vehicle for doing that, and that's consistent with our obligations under the Whistleblowers Act.
I thought we did have a whistleblowers policy.
We've got a policy. What we don't have is a central place for people to go to.
So we don't have an advertised hotline number. Many organisations today have a hotline, so staff are aware of where they can go to, as well as the normal escalation protocols through line management.
I think, Councillor, as being a former member of the FAST committee, that you'll know that any particular inquiry or audit process doesn't carry with it an implication of troubles or problems in a particular area. It's a systematic approach to examining the business, various aspects of the business on a rotational basis, and looking to benchmark our performance and to make improvements. It's a very sound and prudent thing to do for any organisation. I'm sure you appreciate that.
I do, and I'm sure you appreciate that it's my inalienable right as a councillor to ask questions.
Certainly is.
Thank you. The next question I have is the risk maturity update. Can you please explain to us how you're making progress on risk maturity?
We've completed the first three phases of the four-stage journey to a high level of risk maturity. So on the face of it, we've made good progress, but we've really only laid the foundation for what then needs to be a big cultural shift in the organisation. So phase 4 is the most substantive part of the journey, and that's the embedding right across the organisation and understanding of risk management practice and risk management awareness, and building that into everyday decision making within the organisation. That involves extensive staff engagement and training. We stood up a group of risk champions that were distributed in each business unit to drive this work. And then we hit our COVID troubles, and we lost some of those staff members to resignations. And at that point in time, given everything else we were dealing with, we made a conscious decision to pause the work. I have had a discussion with the risk and assurance manager earlier this week about reigniting that work. And we discussed July being the month and the start of the financial year as the opportunity to reappoint risk champions and get the training back underway across the organisation.
This has been a program going on for 3 years, my recollection, maybe 4.
Little over 2, so yeah, not quite 3. We had a staff member who started this journey with us. Took some time to recruit a risk specialist. We then lost that staff member, and we were in a period of having nobody to lead the work for some time. We regained that staff member and reignited the work, and so it's been a bit stop-start through that period.
But we're there now, Councillor. Are there any further questions from yourself?
Thank you.
No? That's fine. Anyone else up here?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks very much, James, for that info. It was really glad to hear you speak about the whistleblowing component, which is not actually reflected in here, and that was one of the questions I was leading to around what that might mean. And this is predominantly an internal focus rather than our external partners. Cool, that removes 3 questions. And the last one I've got here is... Oh, no, that's not relevant either because it's external. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Api. Any other comments? We'll move to the recommendations, and you'll note essentially the first recommendation is asking us to recommend an adoption of the internal audit plan for 22-23, that being the data analytics, the organisational change, consolidation and prioritisation, and further consideration of the asset management audit. So they're the requests there. The rest of those, the fraud and internal audit report, annual internal audit plan, update, road safety, etc., are completed reports. So it's a matter of receiving those as for information purposes, with the one recommendation to adopt the internal audit plan. Can we have a mover from that, preferably Councillor Taylor, I'm assuming, would do that, and Councillor Foley would second that. Do you wish to speak to that, councillors?
No, I think we've heard enough.
Yep. Look, on that basis, I will put the recommendations, and all those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That's carried. We now move to.
I was looking for a deep dive on those speeches, actually. I want a deep dive.
Unfortunately, we haven't got Craig here, so we'll have to pass on the deep dive.
I want a deep dive. Oh my God.
We now come up to those two important reports, the People Plan, item 12, followed by Health and Safety Strategic Plan. Can we have our esteemed human resources people take the stand, please?
Do they have to swear?
Tell the whole truth.
Take the stand.
Good afternoon, councillors.
Just by way, I guess, again of introduction to this topic, as we've covered in the organisational performance reports and in other discussions on organisational performance and planning today, our people are obviously our greatest asset, but they also present challenges to us in terms of the retention and recruitment environment that we're operating in at the moment. But also opportunities. That market presents opportunities, and we also have ongoing concern for the well-being of our staff. And in addition to the three health and safety team that Kirsty before you leads, we have an expanded people and capability team. We have expanded in recent years to support that growth in the organisation and to support everything we do around supporting our people to do their very best work every day in the organisation. So today is an opportunity for you to get visibility of the work that we're doing across both areas, which is obviously critical to the performance of what we do. So with that, I'll hand to Liana to lead out on the people plan.
Please, Liana.
And some of you have seen some of this plan before, but now it looks very pretty, so we've actually made that a pretty document. So before I get into the content of the plan, I'd just like to, and I know you're all aware of this, but we've heard about the flow-on effects of COVID and the Great Resignation, and that was before the war in Ukraine and before rising interest rates and inflation that we're now experiencing. We know we're no different to any other employer at the moment in terms of those impacts, and we know we're in competition with other employers, and we know there's pressure on us in terms of wages and salaries, just like every other employer. So people are feeling unsettled. It's worrying to the people in P&C, and I'm sure all the managers in the organisation as well. It's always on our minds. We've grown a lot in the last few years, as James keeps repeating, and there's a lot of new people still learning in their roles, and sometimes learning from people that are new themselves. So there's a lot of settling in to be done. And so the people plan, it's probably the best time to actually have a people plan. Should always have one, but it focuses on three key areas: leadership, people experience, and sustainable workforce. And under each of those headings, there's tasks, which you would have seen in the paper. So leadership, simply focusing on development, driving the behaviours we want in our organisation, which were identified by the leaders themselves at a leaders forum. Highlighting the need to focus on rewards and recognition, because we need to be doing more than just paying our people to keep them here. We're developing some HR sort of 101 modules for leaders so that they're confident in their roles as recruiters and managers of performance, for example. And we're bringing change management into our business as a business as usual process and providing tools and training for this as well. Under the people experience, of course, we want to constantly improve the experience that people have. So we're monitoring newbies coming in. We've got surveys going out, and just as an example, we're feeding back to the leaders tomorrow on what the newbies are saying about their experience, and we need to make some improvements around that as well. So having that data is quite good. We need to connect our people better to the front line. So we want them to really understand the purpose, because we've got new people coming in, and even people that have been here for a while that may not be able to sort of say what the purpose of the organisation is. So we're talking about things like, a simple thing like putting people on a bus, saying to the leaders, where are the places that we need to take people so they can see what's happening on the front line and what it means to work in an organisation where we're focusing on climate and the environment, and be able to talk about it as ambassadors out in the community. We also need to ensure our people have a better induction, and I find that in our P&C team, we've got people coming to us all the time saying, can we add this to the induction? Can we add this to the induction? The induction's getting bigger and bigger. It's getting to the point where it's sort of unmanageable by our team, but so we have to teach leaders to actually pick up some of that induction. And we want to ensure that people receive the development they need, so we're looking at generic training across the organisation. Some of that's already underway. Under the heading of sustainable workforce, we're developing a competency framework, which is focusing on sort of, again, generic competencies. We're starting to work on the alumni, which is keeping in touch with our ex-employees that want to come back to us or who could refer us on to other potential employees. Talent mapping, which is a really big process, which involves meeting all the managers and sitting down with them and going through their team and where they sit, and us then looking at the high performers and the people that perhaps need a bit of a nudge. Connecting to and supporting university students with summer employment. So we've already gone out to managers to say, how many students do you need this year? Because we know that even last year we had the benefit of employing a couple of final year students straight from their summer holidays into roles in policy and regulation, which was fantastic. So we want to remain connected to them. And we're going to the Careers Expo locally at the Peterborough Arena, which hasn't been done for about 5 years. We've spoken to EIT about what they offer, and in terms of other, going to university expos, that could be something in the future as well. At the moment, because recruitment is on the go all the time, we have needed the help of some external recruitment organisations, particularly around science and accounting. And they're going out using LinkedIn to make contact with these people, sort of behind the scenes to see if they're interested. But, we're trying to promote also that our staff are our ambassadors to go, if we can refer people to the Careers website, and you guys would be as well, if you hear that anyone is interested in roles, you refer them to there. But there's a lot of work going on. So do you have any questions about what's been put in front of you?
Any questions? We've got Councillor Ormsby who's got one.
Kia ora, Leanna. Thank you for your presentation. You talk about an induction process and improving on that. Could you tell us more about what improvements have been made on the exit interviews and that process?
Yep. So exit interviews were a bit ad hoc previously. So now we've developed an electronic exit interview form which is sent to the employee by email that they can fill out. They're given the option to either speak to their manager or James and I, and sometimes they choose that option to speak to James and I directly or James on his own. And then, that information needs to be reviewed from time to time as well and fed back again to the managers. Yeah.
And supplementary.
Yes, Wayne.
As part of, say, the interview questions or the themes, how much do you give to what is in our control, what is out of control for their reason of leaving? Are those types of questions asked?
Yes. So they're always asked, their reasons, and there's a number of reasons people can give. If we pick up anything that we think, we're a little bit worried about, that could be in relation to a behaviour or a manager or something else that's going on that we weren't aware of, we'll make contact with them and try and tee up a meeting just to find out a little bit more. At the end of the day, it's always up to the employee to decide, confidently what they want to hand back. And so when it's anything that we can see you need an improvement to, we generally would say, this is an improvement, you're giving us this feedback in good faith. We really want to do something with this so that other people don't experience whatever it is. Yeah. And they're usually pretty good with that, if you explain it that way.
Yep. Thank you.
Happy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A really great piece of work because he ata mea nui o te ao he tangata, which are those things that are of greatest importance. It's our people. So, and you will have heard that over and over again through many committees. So my first question to you is around where do people such as myself feature within this P&C policy? So I'm neither actually a staff member and I'm neither external completely. So where do troublemakers like myself fit within that gambit?
So it's funny, we were talking about yesterday in terms of having some sort of some generic training across the organisation, because I think there's a need to teach or to explain to staff how councillors fit into the organisation and the political side of it. So what I'm trying to do at the moment is encourage managers of different areas to start thinking about a module that they can put up. P&C team would coordinate that because we need to see all the training across the organisation so we can get the timing right, and that they can present that to the organisation, because people, they don't know, they don't understand. So you did right. I mean, we do need to explain that to people, and then I think people can connect the dots to how things work in the organisation.
Cool. I look forward to those dots so that I can do a bit of joining myself. My next question was around later on in the paper. I'll just see if I can see my comments here. Yep, I've got under sustainable and the work plan, which I'm just trying to find a page number now.
Yep.
Looks like page 53. It talks about developing a competency framework.
Yes.
It refers to a Māori cultural competencies te I don't see any corresponding kōrero on the measures side. So could you help me understand, or is it these are still formative?
So we're at the very beginning, and the initial work on, speaking around cultural competencies is with the Maori partnership team. So they're involved in this and will be involved in it. So we've started already, which you would know about, I'm sure, the Te Rito online training. And there's more advanced training to come. So once again, they'd be a team that would slot into this modular training that should be available throughout the year for newbies and people that have been around a long time to actually tap into. So the Maori Partnership team has said to me that they know that there's targeted groups within the organisation that have a stronger connection to that work and to be, going to iwi meetings and whatnot. They need that, and they're asking for it. They need that support. So they're trying to do it one-on-one at the moment, but we need to make it generic. Yeah.
Well, no, that's fantastic. And just a comment more than a question. I'm conscious of the risks associated to wandering into iwi spaces without the level of competency. So it's about safety more than anything else for all people. And so I look forward to the dots and to the developing whakaaro that we do here with our Māori Partnerships team. Thank you.
Thank you, Api. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, and again for the thought-provoking paper that you've put in front of us. I was just reflecting on exit interviews firstly, and I imagine as the framework gets rolled out, identify, if you haven't already, there's probably two categories of things that people identify as to reasons for leaving. Those which are things you can control, and those which are things that you can't. And the things that you can't are, my mother, lives in Christchurch and she's getting elderly. I got double my pay and a way better job in the Stewart Island or something. Versus, I was having trouble with my immediate report, or it just wasn't the job I expected it to be and I couldn't do what I wanted to do. So is that sort of a fair categorisation of the kinds of responses you'd get, and
yes,
what do you do with that?
And you'd hope that those other things we would already know about.
Yeah.
So you would hope that the staff members had the courage or the capability of raising it with their manager in the first place if there are any other issues. You would hope that someone would inform our team to sort of help out, because that's what we're there to do. And it is disappointing sometimes, not that it's happened recently, but if you read in an exit interview, things that we could have fixed.
Yeah.
So that's more about the leadership competency side and chatting to people more regularly, having their performance agreements, and just chatting to people, really. You can pick up a lot on body language when people aren't entirely happy, and we should be encouraging our staff to raise issues.
But
and
really
not afraid of them.
To expand the range of things that you can control, in other words. Now, the other thing, but I'm picking up on Api's point about a competency framework. My rather like the FARS committee language, I was thinking, well, what is that? I mean, you say what it would address, but what exactly is it? Can you paint me a picture of a competency framework? What is it?
So the framework will identify, and this is a generic framework, like we've got a really good example right now in the science team of a competency framework that's designed by one of the managers in there, and it's about the technical skills that the team leaders, the teams need, and he's gone through each individual and looked at what they need in for their scientific role. This is more generic across the organisation, and you say, you get feedback from the PDP process, and job descriptions, which have competencies in there. And what we're trying to do is just come up with some generic ones, like things like communicating well, teamwork. What else have I got here? Sorry, I should know these off by heart.
And that helps you then know what questions to ask in interviews, presumably, does it?
Well, yeah, it's all connected. So, and from there, once we've identified the competencies that we feel need to be developed in people, we can then put it into the PDP or the performance appraisal system, and we'll say, well, you're kind of here, but you need to be over here. And it just helps everyone in terms of moving forward, because at the moment, we don't have anything. We can guess things, and we probably do a pretty okay job with that, but having the framework will guide people better.
Any other questions from, I've got one or two myself, Leanna, so if you could help me out. Look, I really appreciate the paper and the structure. Being rather pedantic though, I was hopeful that the sustainable workforce section could be broken down a little to feature retention, recruitment, sort of subcategories, recruitment, retention, induction, etc. And I noted a little bit of a mixture in terms of people, what I would consider people experience sitting under sustain. I guess they're intimately entwined anyway, but it was just my pedantic nature wanting to see it somewhere else in the structure. The status of this, I appreciate it's an internal operational report as opposed to a sort of council governance document. Where you're up to with completing and finalising this structure. Is this it? Have you finalised it?
This is it, but it's to me the work plan is a working plan.
Yes.
So and you know there's things in there that the team thought we needed to do, and we're outside even the Crow report.
Sure.
So I want it to be flexible.
Okay.
Where we can add things because we have to be.
Just a suggestion.
Because of the market and everything. Yeah.
If there's room for a few tweaking, it'd be useful perhaps to look at that. My next tranche of questions relate to the organisational performance report and the people and capability aspect of that. And I wonder if you can highlight. You've indicated the vacancies, the people have left, people have come on board, and then you've identified particular areas of expertise. I think engineering, IT is a big one, and science, etc. So, what's your biggest problem at the minute in terms of recruitment?
It's the competition.
Competition.
It's purely based on so the other in March I went through and spent time looking at for all the SEEK advertisements for those roles, and there were pages and pages and pages, and I printed them out for the executive team to have a look at, and that was on one day, which proved the point around those roles and why they're hard to recruit. The other thing I did at the same time, just because how you go off and Google sometimes you get a bit lost, I went into the job ads and I looked at what they're offering those people. So I've actually got also a list of all the offerings in terms of benefits and things that we need to look at that those organisations or different organisations are offering that we might not be.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you've done that, if you like, exterior look at the market, saying we've got a problem. If you were looking to invest most of your time currently, given our current state, would it be in that recruitment side as opposed to staff experience, etc., training? Where would you invest today to help us overcome those issues?
There's two things you've got to balance. So we've got to continue with the recruitment because we don't have a choice. We've got to keep recruiting. So that's continuous, and we do that pretty well, I believe. At the same time, we've got to think about retention because there's no point recruiting and then losing people. So the training and the development is something that we really need to focus on and get on with quickly, because we've got to look at what's going to hold people here. It's not just going to be salary, and if we can't compete with salary or wages, what else can we offer? So we do have to look at how do we keep them here? How do we, and I've done some work around the generations as well. What are they looking for, and got information on that. And it's interesting, the younger generation would really love help with their student loans, for example. Now, I don't know whether we're going to do anything like that, but it identifies at which stage of your career and age what people are looking for. And we're going to have to take, so I've got all this information, it's all I've got at the moment, it's a whole lot of information, but we can't stop. We've just got to keep plugging away at what we can, and we have to do it in and around the recruitment.
Great, thank you. I think Councillor...
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just further to that, so I'm just interested in incentives, what else you're thinking of that might be really good for the organisation to keep staff?
So it may seem small, but staff, ever since I've been here and since Kirsty's been here, have been asking about, what about the old discount card that we used to have? So we're just about to roll out a thing called Boost, which is an electronic version of the discount card, and people have an app on their phone, and the discounts they can get are pretty good, actually. So we're testing that at the moment. That'll be rolled out as another, and we're stating it as we're presenting it as a staff benefit. They get all the health and safety benefits and things like that. I think we've undersold, and we need to promote a little bit more around the insurance that we provide to staff, because, we've had some experiences in recent months where that insurance has been an amazing benefit that many other organisations don't have. We do promote that now in our recruitment processes, and we need to look at more. So we need to look at the other thing, rewards and recognition. So rewarding staff. So that's a session tomorrow. It's talking to managers about how do you need to reward and recognise staff at the time, and what are some things you can, instead of just taking someone for coffee, what else might you want to do that matches the reward to the person? So we're doing lots of teaching, lots of providing information to the leaders and saying to them, what more can we do? Because you guys are there, we're not with the staff. We sit upstairs and we work away. They should have that knowledge. Yeah.
Thanks. I was interested in what you said last was more about more social interaction and teams getting together.
Yeah, connectedness.
Socially.
Yeah, socially. Like, for example, staff have requested that we go back to the planting days that happened prior to COVID. We haven't had one of those for ages. And so that's something that we were looking at before the last lockdown.
And I'm absolutely certain you'll have these, but I just want to make sure that it's clarified that that every employee has their KPI set by their managers and they...
That's in their PDP process. So they'll go through what their job expectations are, and as well as some, hopefully, and this is what we're trying to teach, some challenging objectives as well to sort of push people, I like to see, outside their comfort zone, where they're feeling at the end of that they've actually learnt something on the way.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. Api, you had a follow-up?
Follow-up question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first is really excited about lots of bits and pieces in the report, particularly about the alumni and what that represents around retaining knowledge and drawing people back to some of the activities that we have going. And so there's a follow-on question for that for me, and that's about, while we're at early stages and while there's no real lane definition around where this could go yet for me, so I'm just chucking out there that wondering whether or not within the thinking, two questions. First is, what is the rationale behind restricting or limiting our P&C policy to careers days? What was the thinking there, and is there any thinking which moves beyond that? And my second question was, just as with the alumni, Te Ao Māori or Mātauranga Māori has passionate people who have daily practices within our environment, and the ability to have a networked or a pathway from my gumboots in my rohe into a desk next to one of your colleagues might not necessarily be easy to see within a careers day or within that lane. And so is there a portion of the thinking of this policy around how we might be able to build alignment between our natural partners, and in this space I'm speaking of those who are kaitiaki, those who are community-driven members that are achieving environmental outcomes, our PSGs, to try and encourage alignment around capacity building and encouragement, because once, I can only speak from my own perspective. Once you've got a pair of gumboots on and you're brought up in a space to fall in love with that environment and be active in that space, perhaps working here is a natural extension of that. And so is there any thinking around developing an alignment between, one, because if from a Māori perspective, if you're already that invested in the environment that you're wading through streams, checking the health of eels, or whatever the environmental condition is, then there is a buy-in or a security of being linked to that person that gives you a long time relationship. When I'm working amongst my own hapu and whānau, I might refer to it as slaving me out while you got me. So, but really the positive spin of that is we are heavily focused and dependent upon our relationship with the environment, and so that's a natural alignment to the aspirations of this organisation. And so is there some thinking, granted that we're at the beginning of this process and that we haven't yet defined the lanes, but is there thinking around alignment to bringing in what would be naturally great partners to have who could encourage people to come into this space as part of that incentive, part of all that capacity building?
Hasn't been thinking around that yet, but I'm very excited to hear that, because if we get any tips and tricks along the way of how to do that, and obviously I don't know who the people are that I can connect with or we can connect with, but I think it's a great idea.
So
I spoke to Ben Douglas a while ago, and we were talking about students coming into the organisation. So we had a meeting with all the managers that have employed students, and he told me about his experience, and I don't know who the partnership is, but where he gets people going into the forestry, and there was some connection, I think, to that. But he's not having students this year, but yes, agree.
Cool bananas, thank you.
Because it is about bringing people in with passion, and if they have that passion to begin with, then again in the future we may be able to have some, and we've talked about it, cadetships, support people to go off and study and that sort of thing, but we're not that advanced.
Great, thanks very much, Liana. Great report. Can I have someone to move, please? That's Councillor Barker.
I had a
Oh,
question.
you've got a question?
I was just
Make it very brief, Councillor.
I was shocked at your admission of anyway. Just on the question, seems to me that you talked a lot here. I'm kind of on the same track as Api, but slightly different, I think, in that when we talk about pay and rations, money, and so on. And these are important things that people consider. But people do work for other reasons. You know, they work for things that's about that it makes them feel that they make a worthwhile contribution to the community, that the job offers them a place and opportunity to grow, that it's a part of a great community, they feel part of a team. These are sort of the other side of life. So are we focusing on how we might create that sort of learning, growing, emotional connection to the organisation and the community side of things? I'm mindful that, for example, when you had people were miners in a lot of places, they stayed working in the pits because they enjoyed playing in the brass band afterwards. They had a very high cultural content in their work. This is what drove them. This is part of the team, and they did that. So these cultural experiences enriched them, and that kept them on in the job in a way. So are we thinking about how we might do that?
So we have been having a lot of talks recently about how to connect people to what we do as an organisation with the environment, because there's some people like scientists and engineers and policy people that know exactly and definitively, they know what the organisation's doing, but there's many other people that work in the organisation that may not have that knowledge. They may come in with a, the heart for the environment, and some may not. So the idea we want, or what we want to do, is have everyone feeling that and understanding it and be able to talk about it. So we do have a bit of work to do on that. Some of the managers in the organisation in the last year have also been looking at career pathways, because before people would come in and they'd be an advisor or something like that, and they'd stay an advisor. They're trying to create some career pathways so they come in as a junior, intermediate, senior, so they feel that they've got some place to go. So that's underway. Lots more development is what we need around this. And like I said, the idea of a bus going around like Hastings District Council does, where they go around all the sites and they explain it with the experts from the teams, explain what those areas of work are and what it means. Have I answered your question properly? Or have
Yeah, I
missed
think so.
something
And the
out?
other thing I think we need to try and see organisations as developing people with further education. They grow not only educationally wise as well as emotionally. That if we do that, then people are more likely to stay. That we're not just concerned with coming through the door, typing out so many keystrokes a day, and then leaving. You with me? We want to be engaging with them to see them develop emotionally and educationally, intellectually, in every way we can.
Realistically and practically, there's always some people that come in the door and I'll say, it might be people with the lower salaries. They're coming in for the job, for the money. They may not have yet connected to what we're here for, the purpose, and that's the bit that we need to do. So regardless of what their job is, we still need them to feel something, it's something inside. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we'll move on now. Can I have a mover to receive the paper, please? Is that Councillor Barker? Yes, thank you. Councillor Ormsby, would you wish to speak, Councillor? Councillor?
No, thanks. Just thank
Look,
you.
I'll put the recommendation. Thank you for the paper. Well done. Great to see
Very
you.
good paper.
Excellent work and going on there. Those all in favour of receiving the paper will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That's carried. Look forward to seeing you again, Leanna.
Stay with Kirsty while she does her bit.
And
You hold hands.
Kirsty's up next.
Good afternoon.
That's how you create that emotional
Shocker.
connection. Very nice. I
Having
see
a
that.
shocker, Chair. Having a shocker.
It's the caring bit.
Is that on his KPIs? Is he measured up to those KPIs with us? I feel I'm going to be thrown out of this meeting shortly.
Can we move on to agenda item 13, Health and Safety and Wellbeing Strategic Plan? Another great document. So can we have that explained to us? Thanks, Kirsty.
Yep. So this current plan for the next 3 years actually doesn't differ too much from the previous plan. When I came into the organisation in 2020, I arrived on the day that the government had decided that we were going to lock down. So I was here for 1 week and we were in preparation for lockdown for a month for COVID. And then we stayed home for a month and we finally got all our staff back in 2020. And then I continued to look across the business and understand the business and to determine where we were heading in terms of the current plan that was in place that actually I didn't have a lot to do with, but I agreed with the direction of that plan. And so that is really much around the intention to build sustainable integration and engagement of health and safety across the business. So when I looked at, so then in 2021, we, of course, again went into COVID-19 response with Delta, and our staff went home for 2.5 weeks. And then we came out thinking that that might be the end, but of course then we started 2022 with Omicron, a lesser type and variant. But it has had an impact on moving forward in terms of, I came to council and promised you visits to come out with us. But of course COVID has and did scuttle a lot of that opportunity. I do know that you have been able to go to site with different project leaders, which has been great. And so I apologise for the opportunity of not being able to come with me. But we did recruit at the end of 2021 2 new advisors, one who has 15 years experience and one who has 7 years experience. And during that time, we have been looking systematically at health and safety and ensuring that we do have the processes in place. We do, and I'm comfortable with that, but what we want to do is enhance on those, and we'll do that with a sustainable plan that looks pretty much like the last plan that we had. There needs to be more from my team, so I managed both of these advisors. There needs to be more of us out of the office and in the field rather than inside the office managing COVID. So the impact of COVID for health and safety has been huge because I managed COVID for almost 300 staff by myself. And it's been an enlightening experience. One of the key areas for me as the senior advisor at that time was to manage the well-being of our staff. And, you know, I do think that that the importance of making sure that the taonga of our business is protected, and that goes a lot towards the P&C strategy of retaining staff, because staff want to feel valued through that process and emotionally looked after. So the strategic plan has been built around safety cornerstones, so knowledgeable working leadership. We'll continue to have strong leadership, and there will be further training after the elections in September for those new councillors coming in, and a refresher for those councillors who have already been privy to that training. There hasn't been, and I can assure you, any legislative change to governance, so it will be a repeat. And there is, as I say, greater opportunity for site visits because both of the girls have been assigned to different parts of the business, and there'll be opportunity for you to go out and be a part of that. Risk management, we continue to have competence in identifying hazards. In 2020, the organisation identified 5 critical risks, and so we did a bow tie analysis on those, and we currently are and have been in the process of digitising daily risk management for staff. And that is being trialled in one of the areas in Ian Maxwell's group, so integrated catchment. And 2 of his staff have been working really hard with IT to have a digitised format, either by phone, laptop or iPad, that they organise their day, they have all of their safety mechanisms in place in terms of their in-reach and how to be contacted should something go wrong. And equally, when they get to the gate of where they're going, they will risk management any critical risks that they face. So that's, I'm having a meeting with them next week, and that will be rolled out right across the business with education around risk management. As I said, the pandemic response will continue to minimise sources and the impact of the infection of COVID-19. Today, I proudly sit here and say we have managed that incredibly well. And I did say to ELT on Monday that we have no known contact of work-to-work contact for COVID-19 in our business, which is truly a blessing, but also I pay tribute to the managers who went through their groups and formulated a plan with their staff to make sure that there was low contamination, because they put people into sectored groups and rotation, and some people stayed out of the business. We also have forward-looking conversations. I'm constantly updating from Ministry of Health, WorkSafe, Local Government New Zealand, and our local councils. We've worked collaboratively together. Last year was particularly difficult for us because we had also the requirement to have a mandate, which was particularly hard for our staff and for P&C. We did take a very broad approach. We consulted widely, and we had a mandate that also supported staff who did not wish to participate in the vaccination process. And we retained almost all of our staff through that process. Our contractor and service provider management, we will continue to improve contractor and service provider health and safety. It is an area of high focus for the team in the next financial year. Procurement, I've already spoken to. They do reviews on their contractor management. All our contractors have to be site-wise approved or higher, so of a comparable nature. So CAA, LTNZ requirements that would see them above what site-wise. And the good thing is that site-wise now have a gold standard, which a lot of our contractors are achieving. So we, as a health and safety team, will work with project teams and procurement to ensure that health and safety is in those project plans. And also we will be doing site observations on high-risk contractors. And that will be dependent on the type of project. We've got a drilling project on at the moment, so we'll keep a close eye on that and we'll be visible. So therein lies an opportunity for you to come with us on those site visits so that you can see that one step away from our business actually shows you that we are managing and looking at the risk that those contractors may pose back to us as well. Worker engagement and culture. The health and safety team continues to support the participation of workers. We are on every single health and safety meeting that's in the organisation, as well as the collaborative one for the organisation. And that includes representation on the works group health and safety team as well. And we've got, for the first time ever, a representative from works group to be on our health and safety, our HBRC health and safety team. So that's awesome. We regularly meet with other councils. I cannot see any reason why we wouldn't collaborate with councils in our region to make sure that actually we're all kind of moving in the same way. And if we are, able to have people who even wish to come inside and look at what we're doing and share information, so that we're across the region, we're actually creating best practice right across the board. Communication, for me, is hugely important, and how we communicate health and safety is absolutely quintessential to the success of health and safety. I'm incredibly passionate, as are my team. I recruited for passionate people. And so for us, the success of being able to integrate health and safety where it's not seen as a tick box criteria, that people actually live, eat and breathe, the fact that they come to work in a particular way, they go home safe every day. That's really important for me and in my career. Across when we did come together quite recently, that was with the Omicron variant, and because we all had to do, I'm not sure some of you who were involved with the DHB would know that we had to do risk assessments. So they were done right across the business, and we shared a lot of that information because everyone was asking similar questions. Mental health and wellbeing, this is truly something that is really dear to my heart and I'm incredibly passionate about. The people, as I say, are the heart of our organisation. We take our responsibility for this incredibly seriously, because without healthy and well people, we don't have the people to do the work. So that is something that's paramount. We promote actively a wellbeing program that minimises injury, improves work-life balance, and improves mental health and wellbeing. We take a holistic approach to employee assistance, and we do not only offer our EAP service, we also offer the opportunity for staff, if they are struggling and they want to have support from a different provider of their choice, they are able to do that, and we support that. We recently coordinated a gathering after our staff had been away with Omicron, and 200 staff attended that event. It was awesome, and Health and Safety and Wellbeing, along with James's EA, were able to pull that together, and it was really, I spoke to James and to Rick, and it was really awesome to see that staff actually, after being apprehensive about coming back into the workplace, were actually there and enjoying the connection amongst their colleagues. So that was awesome. As well as my team, along with Comms, also organised our participation in the Hawke's Bay Marathon, which again was a fabulous event, and we intend to be involved in that next year. We are currently in initial planning discussions for a joint wellness week with Napier City Council. We're literally stone's throw from each other. They've done it very well in the past, and so we're coordinating that. It'll be held down at the Conference Centre on Marine Parade, and everyone will be welcome to attend that. So that event will happen in September. The intention of this 3-year plan is to build health and safety maturity with a confident, informed and well community with those we interact with. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. That's a very comprehensive overview. Are there any questions from anyone on that? Councillor Ormsby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kirsty, for your great presentation. I was going to ask what was the most successful example that you could think of, but obviously you said we weren't a organisation that was part of any contact or spreading of COVID during that time. So congratulations to you, the team and the exec for managing that so well. My question is around, therefore, what is probably the next most successful example that you can think of in terms of the strategies that you've put in place?
I think apart from the non-work to work contact, I think the fact that the executive leadership team and myself worked really closely together to create a really confident and robust plan around managing our staff through that time. You know, we're in our third year of COVID, which if you'd asked me at the end of 2019, you know, would we have ever experienced a pandemic? I'd been involved in one in 2012, but nothing on this scale. And I think the fact that we've managed to retain a large proportion of our staff's mental health and wellbeing is a tribute to what was led by the executive leadership team, but supported by health and safety.
Yeah.
Councillor Barker.
Start with two questions. Firstly, you talked about mental wellbeing. I know that some organisations run a mental health first aid course for staff. Do we do that here? Should we do it here?
Yes, we do it.
Excellent.
We ran it in 2020 for all of our staff because if you remember back then, we had the droughts and a lot of our staff were facing really under pressure farmers, and then we had the impact of COVID on top of that. We initially ran it so that we would have a variety of people throughout our organisation who could be representatives for mental health and be able to look after their colleagues. We then ran it again for our parts of our policy and regulation people, our consent people, because they were facing people also who were under pressure. And we have that ongoing. We run that through St John's Mental Health as their program, but we also run a program and sometimes in conjunction with Napier City Council with a company called OPSEC who run a shorter version of that, which enables our staff to feel safe when they're engaging with a person who may not be doing so well, but also have the knowledge of know how to refer. So that's ongoing, yes.
Excellent, thank you. I really appreciate that. Second is, with your health and safety meetings, I presume you'll have a health and safety meeting regularly, like once a month. Is there a standing invitation to councillors to be able to attend?
It happens every 3 months because it's a quarterly meeting. But if you'd like to attend, I'm happy to put you on the agenda.
I think it would be a good idea because as councillors, we are obligated by law to be aware of the health and safety issues in the organisation. And one of the ways in which we can be aware is to attend those meetings. Not everybody could attend, but I think it would be wonderful if one or two councillors were able to attend a meeting like that.
Yes.
It would send, I think, a really strong message to the staff that we are concerned about health and safety. I just think it would be sort of a mutually reinforced thing. We would get a better appreciation to what people are raising.
Yep,
I think
no, that's absolutely fine. I think it's really cool. So one of our GMs, Petty, we normally had a rotation of GMs who would attend our health and safety meetings, and so they would probably attend maybe once a year.
Yep.
But Petty this year decided that he wanted to be the GM that represented, and I think that's really good because it builds capability and consistency in the messaging back to ELT.
Yep.
And so we hope that will happen going forward, and absolutely happy to invite you.
Thank you.
We'd even do it on a roster basis, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Well, I think it'd be quite good. We can work it out. Yeah.
Suggestion there, Councillor. Api, can you?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Actually, my question is to James, and it sort of spans this item and item number 12 around people plan, the link. When the Three Waters announcement started a few years back, we were talking amongst our LTAs around a regional approach to staff recruitment and retention, I didn't pick that up in our conversations here during these two items, but has that been able to build any value to this process or our processes as an organisation to put together a package?
It's funny you should mention that because it was discussed amongst the regional CEOs on Monday at our weekly call. So there has been some work to improve the level of visibility of particularly the recruitment areas of pressure and dialogue amongst the people and capability managers of the 5 councils in the region. That hasn't moved at this point to any sort of formalised hunting with a pack or sharing of staff or what have you, but that is a live discussion at the moment, particularly in the context of Three Waters. So what I'm hearing is that many territorial authorities around the country are having turnover of up above 30% at the moment. And people obviously who are in the Three Waters engineering space are looking at their futures. There's a huge amount of capital investment trying to be achieved in Three Waters as well. So we're seeing, particularly in those areas, people shifting, lots of vacancies, and then with the reforms, it potentially accelerates or exacerbates some of those issues. And so I think in that area, as the sort of most urgent priority, we'll see the councils working more closely together. The challenge that we all have is that we love the idea of putting together competent teams that can be deployed across the organisation in times of need. But I have to tell you that everybody is in a state of need and everybody is underspending their capital and everybody's behind in their work and everybody's short of staff. So what you actually need is a political and everybody reports that their elected members are telling them that their work is a priority and their long-term is a priority. So what we'd need the 5 councils' elected members to come together and make some choices about whose infrastructural capitals works across the region is a priority relative to one another. And at the moment, we don't have a governance mechanism, but I do know we have a collaboration day coming up of elected members, and it is an opportunity for you to talk about what is a more coordinated approach of local government delivery look like for the region.
Point taken.
Thank you, James. And there are further questions. Can I, Charlie? I haven't heard from you for a long time, so you're
just,
up.
Just one, and that are you confident that your health and safety interviews and that provide a good pathway that people will push stuff up, or do you have an emergency line that for those people that actually want a direct channel to the top?
Are we talking in terms of health and safety or wellness?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So because I actually manage the wellness of the organisation, and so and I sit underneath James, and so for me those conversations are confidential and confident, and there's lots of conversations if people wanted that to go further that they know that could occur. In terms of having we in P&C, which health and safety sits under P&C, we have confidentiality as one of our key values. So anyone who wants to raise an issue, often there is a face-to-face conversation with those people anyway to see where they would like that to go.
Can I just add a bit to that? So in terms of the actual health and safety committees and whatnot, things can be raised there, but the health and safety team are so visible that they pick up things out and about as well, and there's almost like it's not, the carpet's getting worn out, should I say, outside Kirsty's office with people going with issues and raising issues and solving issues together. So it's not just the health and safety committee, it's happening all the time. Yeah. And we're small enough at the moment to be able to do that too.
Well, it obviously leads to the point of who prioritises upgrades or health and safety measures that are brought up. Because, some parts of the organisation might just be locks on the doors or car parks, and others have different priorities, and if you let them slip, then some people miss out for ages.
Yeah. So in terms of that, so my team, even though we're quite small, we sit in each group area. So each of the health and safety advisors, including myself, we sit across the business. So we go to not just the Health and Safety Committee of HBRC, we go to all the group health and safety meetings as well. So that's why we have a really good understanding of the breadth of sort of health and safety issues that might be being raised that can come into an executive leadership team meeting. Yeah.
Thank you. Will, did you have a?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just picked up on your point you raised around the staff wellbeing during the drought, and we've just been up to Wairoa and seeing the impacts up there of the storm damage, and I guess a reaction when something like that occurs, we get together and we think, you know, what can we do to support the landowners or the farmers that are impacted from these events. But yeah, became very aware around up in Wairoa anyway. Recently, you know, meeting our staff, hearing from them, seeing what they're kind of coming across and having to deal with, and I guess it's very much should be at the forefront of our minds as much as the landowners as their mental health and wellbeing. I mean, you know, farmers don't have a great track record with mental wellbeing at the best of times sometimes. So definitely something to be aware of, our staff driving up in gateways each day, and particularly during those bad events, you know, perhaps just being aware of what they're coming across.
Yep, and that was why we put that mental health first aid training in place, and it is something that we've got more training anticipated for. So I only met with the provider again on Thursday of last week, because also under some of our projects there has been an allocation of social funding from the government around working with contractors and those you know, iwi and people in communities where we can have an influence wider, and that is one piece of work that we're currently working on for our river community, and so working with part of the asset team to speak with someone who can run in workshops for contractors to make sure that in those scenarios where they're actually working in situations with the impact of COVID, coming across other people who may be part of that river community, to be able to make sure that they're okay as well. We always anticipate that business is big business, but a lot of our businesses in Hawke's Bay are medium to small, and they don't have the infrastructure that we have here. So that's a really cool initiative that we're doing.
Look, thank you so much. That's a very comprehensive overview, and we really appreciate the work you do.
Thank you.
The performance on COVID was exceptional, so well done to the team on that. And like I said, it's a joint venture with HR and that carpet replacement strategy next year. So thank you for that. I'm happy to move the recommendation to receive the report. Second, Councillor Barker. I don't wish to speak. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Barker?
I just want to thank you for your work on the COVID, and also pick up on the point that you made about, I remember SARS and a few other things, but nothing prepared us for what we thought we were going to have with COVID. And at the moment the pandemic merged, people had no idea what was going to be the end of it. Very hard to describe today our thoughts and feelings at the time and what our projections were. They seemed completely unrealistic, but they were real at the time and had a very powerful grip on the psyche of people then. So thank you for your good work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look, all those in favour of receiving that report, say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That's carried, and we'll move quickly to our penultimate paper.
Penultimate?
That being...
You're playing catch-up here, are you?
I am indeed.
Ian has been so patient.
I haven't been able to quell the enthusiasm of the committee, and I apologise for that.
That's a failure of leadership.
Excuse me, Chair, can I just quickly say something? I should have said it in front of Kirsty, that perhaps we need to look at standing tables for the chamber.
Standing tables? Yes,
So I can
after
stand
6
up now.
hours. And
Can we stand for 2 minutes?
it's a sitting orders. Well done, Matt. We're up to agenda item 14, which is the forestry paper, and we've accelerated that into the, it was kicked for touch from the Environment Committee
And before
elsewhere.
then,
Could we hold that over to the next?
I think we should hold it over for
No,
Fars.
just come back around.
Okay, and we've got Ben online, and now I just
Ben's faded
all
away.
jokes aside, for posterity, this paper is important because it articulates and encapsulates all of our forestry holdings. It's a superbly crafted paper, and particularly the research out of town, other councils as well. So it becomes a reference document. So, Chris, do you want to, or Ben, who will take us forward?
Thank you, Chair. So, look, Ben will lead the discussion. Just introducing Ben Douglas. He looks after his forestry estate, or our forestry estate. And so this was a wide-ranging paper to provide councillors with a background both on our forestry and also Mānuka. If you recall, there was the article last November about our Mānuka investments, which really kicked off this paper. So I'll hand over to Ben to take you through the key points, and then hopefully we can have a bit of a discussion and question and answer session.
Ben, where you go?
Yeah, hi everyone. Hey, I didn't have anything prepared to talk about. It's the, as was mentioned, I think it's the fourth meeting this has been to now, maybe third. So I'm presuming everyone's had a good chance to look through it. Happy to take any questions about any of it.
Great, thanks, Ben. That's a sort of response I really like. Are there any questions on the paper? Reminded that it's not the end of the trail. We've got council itself before we conclude the paper. So, any comments or questions to Ben on this? You got off scot-free there, Ben?
Well, I have just kind of...
Oh, I have got some questions.
We just have to think sometimes our brain just goes back to the next thing.
I have questions about, we've made quite a substantial planting of eucalypts quite some time ago as a experimental block to see how they fared. Do we have any definitive outcomes from that which are available for the public, printable, etc.?
Yeah, the bulk of our eucalypt plantings well, actually they're fairly well spread, but the ones we're having issues with are down in Central Hawke's Bay there. And the issues are pretty well known and are basically a result of the wastewater irrigation scheme not going ahead. I wasn't around at the time, but that's the only reason I can think of why Eucalyptus regnans was planted in that environment, with Eucalyptus regnans being known as a higher rainfall type of eucalypt. Is I believe at the time they must have been banking on the irrigation going ahead, which would have brought the soil moisture up to a level that the eucalypts would have done reasonably well in. With that not proceeding, hence the issues we're having with mortality and the droughts. The same species we got planted up in Mahia and up in around the Tūtera area, and there's been no issues whatsoever. And they're doing really well. Eucalyptus regnans a forest of Eucalyptus regnans holds more carbon than any other forest on the planet, and I guess that must have been a major consideration in their planting. In terms of a straight-out trial block, we've got only 2 at this stage, and they're much smaller in scale. And I'm proposing that going forward, that's the option. That's a good option with alternative species, rather than before we launch into too much investment, we really invest in the trial and develop the genetics. Radiata pines had generations of that, and it's got a great head start. Whereas these other species have got a lot of potential, but they really are playing catch up. So. The property Waiharpa up at Tūtera there, we've got a 5-hectare trial block there with an organisation called the New Zealand Drylands Forest Institute, and they came about by way of there were issues down in the vineyards down in the South Island around Marlborough, and with all the posts breaking, they ended up with big piles of posts that they couldn't get rid of. With all the copper chrome arsenic treatment in them, they couldn't burn them. They had to go into a proper landfill because of the leachate risk. So it was a massive, what continues to be a big issue. And like a lot of these things, it took the leadership and energy of one person to really get behind it and drive it, Paul Millen, and he's still in that seat now. And over the years, he's really accumulated a good team around him. We've got one of the earlier trial blocks. It's 5 hectares up there, and there are 8 different species, and we're getting some good results out of that. The results from our trial aren't partitioned off where they're separately available. They're sort of amalgamated in, and they do their analysis with our trial block included with all the various other trial blocks around the country. The winter last winter we planted another trial block of one of those species that the NZDFI works with down on the banks of the Waipawa River there. And that's sort of too early on to have had much results from. They've gone through and done a survival assessment, and they won't go back for another 4 or 5 years, and they'll start looking at form and that sort of thing.
Great, thanks, Ben. Did you have a?
Has anyone got a charger for the iPad? Mine's just died. It's been such a long meeting. I charged it up overnight. It's just.
Sorry,
Oh, you want to say it yourself?
No, I do have a question though.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Because I think I've got a few buried in there, but I can't.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm just looking at next steps. Yep. So if, in terms of the carbon trading policy and that coming to council when it's complete, I mean, I'm just testing here. Do we have enough ability for a trading policy? I mean, I'm questioning the value of creating the policy based on the assets we do or the carbon trading that can be had. Or is this is to be built for future prospects?
Chris, I think you're on.
So, thank you for the question. Look, I think we're already doing talking about doing certain activities with our carbon credits. So we've used some to fund some positions.
Yep.
There's been other proposals put forward for how they can be utilised. And what this policy will do is help us our decision making around those sorts of decisions and whether we want them in the market, whether we want to simply withhold them. And at the moment, we have really no guidance apart from them collecting, no real guidance or strategic direction as to where we want to head with them.
One more, sorry. So I'm looking at the forest assets of New Zealand territorial authorities, which I found really interesting as a comparison. I suppose just to share a feeling of disappointment with the goals for forest management. And I understand we're in the position we are in, but comparatively to other councils, they have biodiversity, they have recreation, and we don't seem to have any of those values or goals in our own portfolio. So I suppose the question is, the next time for a review, a plan review of our forestry assets, that we are able to consider those more and exactly what that means for planning for those forestry assets so we can include those values.
Yeah, so Ben might be able to add, but and I'm not sure which part of the paper you're referring to
so
there.
It's the table 1 of the attachment. So
Table
there's a
1 of
whole
the
table.
Yeah, goals. So obviously many of our forests have other uses. So for example, Central Hawke's Bay, we've got mountain bike cycling. In terms of Tūtera, we have recreation and a destination around our forestry assets. So it's probably just how we are stating those particular goals.
Yep. Okay, so that would be good when we do the review to include what is actually on offer.
Well, I just wondered whether, in fact, given that we've got another step to council, whether you could look at that column and just make some additions. Yeah, that's on page 87 of the.
Well, I wasn't quite sure what the process was to include them. So,
I mean, this is we ultimately will receive the paper at council, so we're referring it to council. So, do you think we could make that adjustment? There, Chris?
Absolutely. I think we could be a bit clearer on the totality of our values for those assets. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else out there that people want to, yeah. All right, well, listen, excellent paper. Well done, Ben. Great work out on that forestry. I know how dedicated you are in there. And I think we've got our portfolio, which we can be proud of, actually. And but as Councillor Ormsby pointing out, perhaps we could look at the next steps and how we can even utilise them more for the benefit of the whole region in all sorts of ways. So thank you for that.
Happy to move.
You're happy to move, Councillor Ormsby? And that's seconded by Councillor Foley. Any comments at all?
No, that it was just, I appreciated this paper coming because I wasn't fully aware of the forestry assets that we did have under our control. So thank you very much.
Will?
I'll just reiterate that. Very good information paper for us.
Thank you. Martin, do you?
No, I just may be missing it, and I apologise. I read this before the Environment Committee meeting and didn't reread it. Paragraph 5, the discussion of 530 hectares of commercial forestry. Can you remind me where in the report that's discussed?
Paragraph 5. 500. Yeah. It might not be specifically addressed in there. I can flesh that out a bit more before the next before it goes to council, if you like.
It's not the Central Hawke's Bay Forest, is it, or is it? They part of the 530 hectares, or is it something different?
Oh, so the five HBRC owned properties are over 1,000 hectares, but there's only about 530 hectares of commercial forestry on them. Yeah, and then we've got the Crown owned Soil Conservation Reserve on top of that, which is another 500 odd hectares.
Yeah, so where are they?
So we've got 2 down in Central Hawke's Bay, Waipukaro and Waipawa.
So they're the two discussed in that part of the paper.
Waipukaro, Waipawa, Mahia, Tūtera Regional Park Forest, and Waihapua Forest, which is in the same area.
So they are all discussed in the paper, they're just not sort of, okay, I understand. I couldn't quite track whether they were some different category or part of that cluster, so that's what I wanted to understand.
Right.
All right, well, look, thank you for that. Anything else from anyone? Okay, look, where are we up to?
We've moved
the forest paper.
Yeah.
We're up the forest paper. You're doing all right. Just
Any other comments? Any other comments?
Any other comments? And all those in favour of receiving the report will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That's carried.
A long day, Chair. You're suffering.
Thank you very much, Ben. We'll hear from you again, possibly in the council meeting itself. And we've got a few just minor changes to go with that. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
So we are up to item 15, which is minor items, and I don't think we had any. So we'll now go to public excluded, just to confirm the minutes. So can I have someone move, Councillor Ormsby, Councillor Lambert, that we move into public excluded? All those in favour of going to public excluded will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That's carried. We're now in public